In studio today, the Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, Minister of Health, Honorable Eugene Hamilton, and Mrs. Michele de la Coudray Blake, the Director of Counseling Department in the Ministry of Social Services. Good morning, Ministers and Mrs. Blake. Welcome to Inside the News.
Good morning to you, Garth.
Yes.
Good morning.
And to your listeners and viewers as well.
Great. The theme for today's program is mitigating the economic and socio-psychological impacts of COVID-19. Inside the News is brought to you compliments Carib Brewery and The Cable.
As social distancing becomes the norm of our everyday life, The Cable wants you, our customer, to know that we are here for you every day. Just log in to us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us your feedback at email customerservice@thecable.biz. Visit our website www.thecable.net. It's also nice to know you can pay your bills at a distance, online at all commercial banks, or at www.thecable.net/pay. Now's the time to try online banking. It's ultra easy. Call us at 465-2588, 662-7742, or 763-0184. The Cable. We're here for you.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go round.
Good morning again to one and all. The plan today is to have a discussion with the esteemed panelists during the first hour up to the news time, and then continue that discussion after the news when we will take calls. I would like to remind the listening public that the aim of WIN FM is to play its role as a fourth estate in building our young nation, without fear or favor. Our mission is to educate the people of our federation and allow all sides to respectfully express their views on issues of public importance. We aim to create an accessible medium for all to submit and listen to sober recommendations, ideas, and concepts for the development of our country, not only through our policymakers, but through all of our people. The COVID-19 pandemic has been the greatest national challenge of this generation. During times of adversity, people and nations tend to show their true colors. Our public health preparedness system is being tested. Our people's reasonableness, humanity, and mental toughness are being tested. Honorable Prime Minister, your cabinet's leadership abilities are being tested. And now within our particular situation with an imminent election, our nation's political maturity is being tested. These are truly unprecedented times. My goal today, therefore, is to facilitate the examination of our current challenges and discuss potential solutions, helping all to gain important insights from our cabinet leader, our healthcare leader, and one of our top social experts on what we can do together as a society to make it through the tough times ahead. Before we hear from the panelists, I wish to personally thank the Honorable Prime Minister for steering our nation's ship through these pandemic-induced rough waters. I personally felt that your silence as Prime Minister between March 8th and March 22nd was deafening and left us adrift, especially given the rapidly evolving threats arising during that period. I even criticized you and the cabinet for this in my Dear Government, Where Are You Facebook post. However, when you did take charge, you did well and made some unpopular decisions which have navigated us safely to calmer waters, with no loss of life as a noteworthy achievement. As a nation, we must be honest, reasonable, and fair, especially in times like these. You are just as worthy for commendation as your frontline team who have served us with honor and duty. I also wish to thank Dr. Laws, Dr. Wilkinson, Mr. Samuel of the task force, the Commissioner of Police, Superintendent Cromwell Henry, the security forces and their teams for their good work. All hands were truly on deck. Your pandemic response team has thus far, despite some hiccups, been efficient and informative. We are an informed nation, which has comforted and educated many. No one and no plan is perfect, and we're not sailing smoothly just yet. But when this difficult journey is over, those who have served honorably, tirelessly, and without additional financial incentive should be considered for the highest honors our nation has to offer. Now, in the reopening stages of our economy, by way of our new normal, your work must not stop. Now is not the time to switch on autopilot. I'm sure you agree. In fact, from a health perspective, the pandemic is still very much alive. It may even be more important to keep our guards up, as relaxed rules give people a false sense of comfort. One only needs to walk around Bastille to see how many people are liming, drinking, and not social distancing, many without masks. We must each play our role in addressing these delinquencies and should always support the police in enforcing our laws, which are made for the benefit of the society as a whole. Unfortunately, a large group of our people think our journey is over and we are back to normal. You and your pandemic response team therefore need to continue to be focused and active, because 100 years ago, we learned that the worst of the Spanish flu came in its second wave. From an economic perspective and resultantly mental health, societal perspective, we will now be entering, most experts argue, the even more dangerous waters of an extended global recession with an uncertain end date. Gross unemployment is rife, hardship is rife, anguish is rife. These are the cold hard facts facing our federation and much wealthier countries already, with the worst yet to come. In that context, with a new global economic restructuring approaching and the uncertainties that come with such change, we hope to hear from the panel and our callers your views on what our new normal in St. Kitts and Nevis should look like for the short-term and long-term stability of our nation, socially, psychologically, and economically. I anticipate a thought-provoking show and invite our panelists to make their opening statements. Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilkin. And let me say good morning to all who are tuned in to WIN and other radio stations which are carrying this morning's Inside the News. I am privileged today to have with me the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, Minister of Agriculture and Health et al., Mrs. Coudray Blake, who is one of our more experienced psychologists in country, and we are happy that we could all come to add to the ongoing public information in the country regarding a significant pandemic. I want to say, of course, that we have had an all-of-the-society response from this one, and we have, at the government level, worked to a plan. The plan which we had worked was clearly anchored in our own realities, and therefore we determined in advance when the Prime Minister would intervene in this matter. We clearly had to provide space for the professional people to take the leadership, because this emerged and continues still in its main to be a health pandemic with ramifications, of course, across all of society. And therefore, what may have appeared to have been a delay was never a delay. It was how it was planned that it should be. The Chief Medical Officer had indicated, Prime Minister, at this particular juncture, we would want you to intervene. We will take the debate, the argument, the public education as far as was necessary up to this point. Then we would need further political intervention. It wasn't by accident. We also sat down and discussed when, as inevitably we knew it would come, there was our first case. who would be at the front line at the briefings dealing with that. We settled that our Minister of Health, Senator Wendy Phipps, would be the persons. These are not coincidental choices. They were part of a well-planned strategy to deal with this one. Indeed, part of the rationale for our becoming now an example of a well-managed response to COVID-19 has been because we had a plan. An earlier clock since January, the health professionals had begun their consultation, their preparation to provide guidance to the government as to how we will have to react in these circumstances. And when you look at the record, because we could confuse timelines as to when we were impacted, others had been impacted before us. And so sometimes what you see was happening in another country was not immediately replicable or necessary in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis. But that is something for the historians to look at. What we do know and we accept is that COVID-19 has been brutal in its impact on economies everywhere, on our way of life, and our relationships with one another. Some of them are undergoing significant changes and will continue as part of the new norm. And I'm sure Mrs. Blake will address some of these. It has brought to the fore the vulnerability of the most powerful countries of the world. And at the same time, it has demonstrated that no country is too large so as not to require the support of the smallest of countries. And this came home in a very real way to us in St. Kitts and Nevis, because we got a call from the Situation Room in the White House. And what was the substance of the discussion was that the White House had St. Kitts and Nevis high on its radar for assistance needed in the production of parts required for ventilators. That took the smallest country into the Situation Room when the most powerful country on earth was faced with the challenge of procuring ventilators. And we had again to marshal our team of health professionals and persons knowledgeable with occupational health issues to come up with a plan to make a determination whether it was advisable for us to, as it were, facilitate those activities. In the end, based on the professional advice, we were able to give support to these efforts. And so I want to commend at the outset all the workers at Harris Silver Limited in Sandy Point and all other workers, for example, at Cajola and Jaro elsewhere, because their fine performance before COVID-19 made sure that when there was this pandemic, the knowledgeable persons pointed to St. Kitts and Nevis as being a place that could be of help and could fill a vacuum and a void that was taking place. The lesson from that for all of us is that we are in a shared world with shared responsibility, and we must recognize this at all times and not just in moments of crisis. COVID-19 has demonstrated to us here how much we can achieve when we support the all-of-society approach to problem solving and crisis management, which my government adopted in the war against COVID-19. There will always be times in the life of the nation when our collective consciences encourage us to speak truth, as Garth did a while ago, leaving the politics behind and acknowledging the greatness of our citizens and residents. Today I want to acknowledge in gratitude the strong support with the majority of persons across the political divide, religious and other stratifications have given to my government. And I am humbled by their own acknowledgement of the excellent management of the crisis by the government and the professional team, which we had given a lot of latitude to intervene, to advise, and to, as it were, bring their policies, recommendations to the government for adaptation. Their own response, the professional team, the frontline workers, and there are too many to mention, but quickly come to mind will be our health professionals, those in national security. And national security encompasses not only the police, the defense force, the immigration, the customs, and all of these organs and ministries of government. Their excellent service have motivated my cabinet to work even harder to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis become the first country to have successfully defeated this COVID-19 and begin the work of repositioning St. Kitts and Nevis as a nation state ready to engage. Of course, there is still time for much of that to happen, but that is the aspirational goal that we hold dear in our heart. I want from the outset then to commend the Cabinet for the support to me as the Prime Minister and to support of the professionals so far. I want again further to say that our plan had always had two components, largely again based on professional advice. What did the professional people say to us, Prime Minister and Cabinet? The first strategic task must be to keep COVID-19 away from our shores for as long as possible. It meant that we were among the first within the sub-region to adopt travel advisories. It meant that we were among the first to have set up health shops at our airports and began screening there. Even when persons were saying there were no screening, screening was in fact taking place. But it was not just having a thermometer to test. It was most importantly, as the science had been directing, that you had to pay attention to persons who were coming from travel hotspots. And that is why I think it was number 7 on the immigration 17. We keep repeating that that must be filled in, because that particular section, if I'm recollecting well, gave evidence as to travel history and became a critical, important measure to determine what further steps were needed by the health people. We were among the first to stop the cruise ships from coming. And when we did so, we were at loggerheads with some of the leadership in the industry who said, but this ship was let into Antigua. We had to make it clear, well, Antigua and St. Kitts and Nevis are two distinct countries, and our priorities at this time may not be the same. Interestingly, going back to where we have been doing this, we had our health team in when the cabinet met to discuss whether or not to deny one of the cruise ships entry into the port. It was Dr. Cameron Wilkin who in the end took charge of the dialogue and indicated and defended the advice that was put to the government. And in the end, we were able to bring that meeting to a proper understanding that health comes first for the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, and everything else becomes secondary. And so I just say that to say that from the very beginning, the government had been relying on very competent professional advice to guide our strategy. Once, of course, we had our first case, we know we had to step up. And again, the plan was well outlined. We will be, and we have been, among the most vigorous in our contact tracing, identifying those suspected, and in fact engaging, quarantining, isolating where necessary their contacts. And when you look to see the hundreds of persons that have been put in quarantine in St. Kitts and Nevis, you recognize that we had a plan of aggressive contact tracing. And all that we have done from the health perspective have been consistent with the guidelines of the World Health Organization. And as a result today, at least as of yesterday, when we examined the statistics at 3 p.m., we had 3,175,207 cases confirmed worldwide of the coronavirus disease, and there was 224,172 cases of death. So this is significant. You contrast that with our case. We have 15 cases confirmed, and this has been the number for some period of time. Importantly, no deaths. Importantly, no deaths. And as we speak, we have no one in the hospital at this time being treated for COVID, which means that the severity that other countries have been experienced have been modulated here in St. Kitts, thanks to the early action of the government and the sage advice we've been getting from our professional people. We also want to thank God for those who have recovered so far, and we expect that His healing mercies will be on those who have yet to be designated as fully recovered. Our hearts, of course, are with our fellow citizens elsewhere in the diasporic community who have passed. I think 2 of them in recent times hailed from Cairn, and so our sympathies are with them. We are at this particular juncture. We are at a juncture where our successes have been recognized internationally. It isn't by accident that the BBC and the Sky News interviewed myself to learn more about the St. Kitts and Nevis success story to date. It is that the facts produce the evidence as to that success. And while we are humbled by it, we know that the course is not yet clear. And that is why we continue to insist, even as we relax, even as we allow people further opportunities to do business, further opportunities to move about, we say be cautious. We say wear the mask. We say observe social distancing. We say continue to pay attention to your hygiene, and in particular, hand hygiene. And the list goes on and on. And of course, continue to build up your immune system. I am satisfied that there have been progress. When we started after the lockdown, you had this mad rush. As we began to relax, as the public education, which has been one of the best in the region, we went to schools, we went into workplaces long before the first case had arrived. And eventually, because these are change of habits, which will take time, eventually the population began to respond positively. We still have more ways to go, and we continue, each of us, to press us in moving forward. The new norm then for St. Kitts and Nevis is that some of those things that have been imposed upon us in terms of our lifestyle, those things will continue for the foreseeable future. For the foreseeable future, we will still continue to wear the mask. For the foreseeable future, until we have a clear vaccine determined, we will continue to observe social distancing and all those issues of hygiene and sanitation. The new norm would require now that in the spatial layout of every public building, we have to observe what has now become the requirement in terms of the 6 feet distancing. And a little later, perhaps, we could go on to speak about the new norms in terms of tourism, where the traveler is going to be much more health conscious, and therefore how do we redefine our health, our tourism product. The new norm would require greater investments in agriculture and fisheries, and our Minister of Agriculture is here to speak about our successful efforts so far to redefine a new pathway for agriculture in the context of nation building. So these are some of the issues we could look at and have a discussion, but I would want to pause now, save also on a note of commendation to thank the Social Security. To date, the Social Security has paid out about 2,000 applications, have processed and paid out 2,000 checks with respect to applications under the wage stimulus package. So that is a significant development. I'm advised every day, payments will be made. So my advice to those who would apply and not yet receive, the necessary procedures are going through. You will not be left out. And if, for example, you are processing May, but you should have been included since April, you will receive 2 checks in May, one for April and one for May, so you will not be losing anything. Again, I invite your patience. I am happy also that we have been able to bring home the students from Jamaica, and we did not charge them 1 cent. I want to draw the comparison. When Antigua mobilized to bring home its students had to pay. Each one had to contribute, I think it was $400 plus US. And the private sector of Antigua made up the rest. There was no free trip in the context of Antigua. Only St. Kitts and Nevis is doing so far what we have done. I want also to indicate that so far we have committed to provide support to our students studying abroad. And over the next 3 months, we expect to spend in the region of $250,000 EC dollars. And finally, I would want to say that as part of our efforts to get the country back to work again, part of the relaxation, again, very deliberate planning, we have allowed construction to take place. We see what is happening on the island resurfacing Main Road. At Borio, where I crossed today, one of the best roundabouts in the region is taking shape. And certainly we see other activities that are now being built out as more people go to work, and a sense of normalcy or near normalcy, because perhaps we'll never get back to what was, is taking shape in our country. So I want to commend everyone for being a partner in this, and to thank the landlords. Some of them, I have been advised, have given significant reductions to their tenants, because this time is a time of shared sacrifice. And I wish that more people are in a position to offer some measure of relief to their tenants at this period of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on program today. Garth, at the outset, you outlined the theme to discuss mitigating economic and socio-physiological and psychological impacts of COVID-19. And so today, my contribution will focus on some of the economic impacts. How, for example, food, agriculture, and fishing will impact on those economic circumstances. I want first, however, to outline that I want to focus on thrift, how people should be conducting themselves, and how agriculture will help us in exercising thrift as we move forward through 2020 and beyond. Before doing so, though, I want to thank those citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis who have been so understanding and so patient when you have to be home for days without being able to go on the streets, which was the other normal, and you have been able to do that with some degree, at least, of assurance that the government is doing the right thing. And so I want to thank you for your patience, the patience you've exercised when you're doing business and paying attention to the program that was put in place for you to be distancing yourself 6 feet away and being patient in carrying out your businesses on the street. I want to thank you for your patience, those of you who go to church and who have not been able to convene churches in the normal way. I noticed, of course, a colleague, a church minister, made a statement the other day, and I would like to suggest to that pastor that it would be good to consult with the COVID team before making public statements, because you do not want to lead your flock astray. We know that 100 years ago, there was a Spanish flu. It happened during the time of the First World War. And during that period of the war, many persons died. But most people who died was when the war ended, because people came out to celebrate the end of the war. And because of that celebration, millions died because of that same Spanish flu. Figures are between 50 million and more that died as a result of the conduct of individuals who thought they could celebrate, disnoticed the norms that were put in place, and they, of course, suffered. Can you imagine they were celebrating not being dead by the war, and then came out to celebrate and died because of their socializing? That is not where we want to be in St. Kitts and Nevis. I said I want to focus on the exercise of thrift. It is one of the very first statements I made when I got into the first COVID discussions. Tighten your belts, thrift. Because our people tend to spend and spend every dime they get. And I am one who believes that the greatest lesson of thrift was taught to us when we read Genesis. We read about Pharaoh. When Pharaoh learned from Joseph what his dream was, Pharaoh commissioned more barns to be built and to put aside during those 7 years of plenty, so that when the 7 years of famine came, they will have enough and to spare. I am calling on our people to understand that we must exercise thrift. Our grandparents taught us that. I remember as a young person in a home with a grandmother, after my mother had gone to England when I was 3 and died when I was 10, and my father already moved on to another family. I remember the days when we go to Brighton to cut grass for the Bukra cattle, Bukra animals. I'm speaking in that language because I want you to understand it. That's what my grandmother did. But she put away something. The day she will say she doesn't have any money, no money at all. And yes, when the Jack's car come up the road for the fish, so you could get your protein, she will go and dig it out from where it was. And even when she gives you that money to go to buy the Jacks, you could smell the camphor ball on the money. That is because she understood how to exercise thrift, to put aside. I am calling on our people to do the same thing. Exercise thrift in all of your affairs, especially in the affairs where people work for so much money. They think it's very small, and they put away none. But the same people are on the street drinking heavily, buying food and things to eat with what they should not really eat. Those same foods which they buy, a lot of, expose them to non-communicable diseases. We need to take account, we need to pay attention to what we do with the resources we work for. So I'm saying exercise thrift. And I want to add one more line to that thrift message, because the truth is, I believe too many of our people go around borrowing money they don't have and they can't afford, buying things they do not need to impress people who don't even like them. It's time for us to exercise thrift. This COVID, this disease, this is telling us that we have to exercise thrift. And so I want us as a people to learn the lesson from this COVID. I want to turn to fishing and agriculture, because I would like to leave some time for my other colleague here to make her opening statement. You see, I'm focusing on fishing, agriculture, because we have had persons who have been leading on the health issue.
Yes.
That was the task provided to them by the cabinet, and they have led on the health issue. Now we have to look at food security. What happens now and in the future? Before going further into that, let me remind you that the Spanish flu lasted for 2 years, from 1918 to 1920. We don't know how long this will last. So we have to position ourselves to be able to feed ourselves, especially if North America begins to say to us, well, listen, we can't allow all our food to go to the Caribbean anymore. We don't know what will happen. So we must position ourselves. We know, for example, that this country consumes 1,300 tons of fish products every year, average, about that. That is about 2.6 million pounds of fish. And we also know that to sustain that demand, 1.7 million pounds, or 850 tons of it, are imported. This provides a huge opportunity for individuals to be cooperative, join a cooperative and start a business to see if you can have an impact. You can just take 1.7 million or 2 million out of that money. You need to make sure that you can engage economically in areas where we have, because 1.7 million pounds, you use an average of $10 per pound. Just a small average. That's $17 million. And you cannot tell me that there aren't enough resources and minds in this country who can team up to take a chunk out of that $17 million by producing local fish. It is time that we take advantage of that. You see, with the onset of this pandemic, countries that export fish may very well be concerned about their own nutrition and eventually decide so much of the fish that we produce cannot go to St. Kitts and Nevis or anywhere else around the world for that matter. And so we at the ministry, we are saying that there's an opportunity to reshape the sector, to build support structures that, of course, will end with more productivity and more local consumption of what we produce. Now, we already see, you see, that some of the things we produce are being substituted by those who are shipping to us. For example, the Federation consumes large amounts of codfish. We describe it as saltfish. And we have seen that in instances they have used the fish haddock, replaced it, relabeled it to send here, which we are using as a substitute almost for saltfish. So we have to be concerned about what we are getting and therefore begin to produce more ourselves. And that is what this COVID-19 has given us the opportunity to do. Of course, we also use a lot of grouper, and we also notice that the Swahi fish has been used, swapped for the grouper. And so when we continue to import like that, we really are not 100% sure of what we're actually getting. So we have to up our local production. That is what I would encourage. I'm therefore going to let you know that we have, through the program, set out some support systems for those who are fishing and those who are doing farming. Let me, however, go to what we're doing in farming, because when this COVID-19 reached our shores and we had to put this program in place for curfew, we know that everyone had to abide by what the rules were. It affected our agriculture significantly. And I want to make the point, because there are persons who would like to say, what is agriculture doing? Listen, let me tell you. In 2019, agriculture produced 409.96 more metric tons than 2018. So there has been agricultural growth in the country. But what we have to recognize is that in our homes, we must become our own backyard gardeners. I remember as a child growing up, we have a guinea tree, you have a mancipo tree, you have an apple tree, you have a soursop tree. Everyone had trees in their yard. Why in September, when I went with the Prime Minister to the schools, I called on students of the schools to plant a tree. And maybe we need to introduce, Mr. Prime Minister, may have to come with that, a national planting day for planting trees. Because we have to plant trees in our homes. Nothing is wrong with you having a breadfruit tree in your yard, a soursop tree in your yard. Become your own farmer. In other words, stop spending money that you could actually save if you plant your own tree in your yard. Nothing is wrong with planting some of the vegetables that you need. It is why we set about in agriculture and have supported those who are doing backyard farming and have provided them with a lot of support to do their backyard farming. On day one, we gave out 50 pounds of string beans, 40 packs of sweet pepper seeds, 84 packs of Bright Star. And I can go on and on. The list is long. Almost 12 or 13 items of distribution of seeds so that people can also farm in the backyard. We put in place a special person to focus on assisting backyard farmers. Help them to understand how to grow, what to grow, and how to treat what they're growing. That is in place. So the backyard farmers, you can approach the Ministry of Agriculture if you haven't done so yet, and you can collect seeds and get the support from the Ministry of Agriculture of how to do your backyard farming. I am confident that if you do that, you will save at least 20 to 30% of what you spend when you go to the supermarkets. I'm not knocking the supermarkets. I'm just saying that it is time we begin to produce some of these things in our yard. We were taught that when we were growing up. Let's go back to basics. We need to do that. I want to suggest that to these people in this federation. You must be able to eat what you grow. Those that our farmers produce and those that what you produce in your own backyards. I'm going to just suggest some figures because, as I said, I want to leave some time for my colleague. We have, for example, out of the stimulus package, already committed $450,000 for those. Remember, we had some farmers who lost livestock. That is already in place. We've already committed and spent $303,000 to acquire more seeds. We have already done $75,000 on feed. Remember that the feed that we're providing now is being sold at half price to those persons who are our customers all the time, getting feed to feed their animals. Of course, another $1.7 million is there for additional batical because we do not want, and it will be free to those who have animals because we want to ensure that we have food security, not only in 2020, but beyond. Of course, we put money for animal tags. We spent another $1,000 on additional seedlings to just 2 nurseries, asking them, look, you produce the seeds, don't do anything, just produce it, and we will give it out to all of the persons, farmers and others who want to plant. The response after COVID, we don't know what the uncertainties will be, we should be sufficiently sourced with food from what we grow on the farms as well as what is grown in our backyards. I want to indicate to you that we've already plowed some 35 acres of land. The Ministry of Agriculture has done that so that we can plant potatoes and other things, because there are some crops, you know, that will help to sustain the well-being of people as long as we can produce them. And if we have too much, we will find a way to create another product downstream to preserve them. Let us produce. I want to indicate to those who are in fishing that we have actually put $50,000 already, selling our wire and other things at the fisheries at half the price. Rope, hooks, all of those things are being sold to fishermen at half the price. And we will be working over the next few weeks to get new measures in place to allow you to be able to fish so that we can have an abundance of fish in the Federation. In the unlikely event that the importation of fish is disrupted for one reason or the other. I want Garth to stop there for now. I know that there may be many questions, and I would like to respond to them. And if I keep talking, I'll speak for the 2 hours. So thank you very much, Garth.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I am Michele Blake from the Ministry of Social Development, Counseling Department, and I'm here to represent the mental health fraternity. We in the mental health think that this is an excellent opportunity for us to be able to talk about some of the things that we're concerned about and that we want to make sure that people have a sense of. So once this started, we felt that it was an important thing to do to be able to start giving information almost immediately, because we recognize that whether people realized it or not, there were going to be some impacts on them individually, on them as families, and on their communities. So one of the things we started to do almost immediately was give information. We still continue to give information because we recognize that everybody may not be able to source an individual contact at every time. So we give information. So we begin giving information through PSAs, through articles, through different sources, through our Facebook page and so forth. And people have been using that. Now, we in mental health want to do a couple of things. And I'm going to do a couple of things this morning in terms of just creating a context. And hopefully as we go along in the program, we'll have questions and perhaps discussions that could explain some of these things some more. So I want to give a context. And the context I want to start off by is saying that this is something that is affecting all of us from a mental health perspective. All of us. What do I mean by that? There are some people who may not have been directly impacted by the COVID-19 response and by the COVID-19 pandemic, sorry. There are some people whose security, food security, financial security, they have a place to live that is safe and comfortable, so their sense of security has not been impacted directly. You have some people for whom this has just totally upended their sense of security. Their homes are not safe, their financial situation is in chaos, and so we're talking about people on both ends of the spectrum, those for whom the impact is perhaps minimal, and for those for whom the impact is more maximized. The thing is, all of us, even those of us who may not appear to have any sort of direct impact on this, all of us are being impacted by this because we are living in a community and in a society. So we see what is happening to others around us. We feel distress when we see families that are in a difficult situation. We see what's happening in the world. We contemplate what this is going to mean for our, the Prime Minister just talked about our new norm. We contemplate what this means for our new norm. We don't know how it looks. The last time we had a situation like this was in 1918 with the Spanish flu, so we don't have anything to compare it to. We don't know how it looks. So even for those people for whom it may not seem as if they're directly impacted by this, we are all experiencing some angst about what is to come next, and that has an impact on a person's mental health. So in terms of the continuum, I wanted to start by normalizing the fact that all of us are going to have reactions. I want to normalize, and normalize meaning that this is not a situation where we need to be talking about those people who are affected versus those who aren't. I want to normalize it, meaning that all of us have an impact. There are some benefits that come from normalizing. So when we normalize behavior, it means that, as I said, that all of us are in this together. And all of us are in this together means our language changes. Sometimes I hear people talking about being able to deal with this because they may be stronger, and somebody may not be able to deal with it because they're weaker. And so those are kinds of language that we want to be able to ask people to remove from their vocabulary, because this is not about strength and weakness. This is about people coping with this situation at different levels. When we normalize something and when we pay attention to it, it means that we pay attention to the overt and obvious things, and we also pay attention to the subtle things. So there are going to be some subtle things that we have to pay attention to as we all deal with this mental health crisis. We're going to have to pay attention to subtle shifts in our family dynamics. We're going to have to pay attention to subtle shifts in how the family functions. What used to work before may not work now in this situation because of financial changes, living situations, whatever it is. And so we're going to have to pay attention to the fact that those shifts often cause stress and distress in families. And so when there's stress and distress in families, those manifest themselves in different ways, behaviorally, emotionally, psychologically. And again, we'll talk about some of those as we go through. Now, there are a couple of things that we look at as normal in this situation, that we are seeing as normal in this situation. We see normal sadness and depression. We see normal anxiety. We see normal increased stress. And we see normal people are grieving losses that they've had. Now, in order to be able to deal with some of these things, I was indicating in another forum that typically people have some ways to be able to deal with some of the things that they're faced with. So when we have anything that stresses us or frustrates us or challenges us, typically we find some way to be able to manage through those things, through either our internal coping skills, mechanisms, or external. So we are in a situation now where our stress levels and our stressors have dramatically increased. Everything has changed for everybody. Physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially, everything has changed for people. And so the coping mechanisms that we typically use to deal with getting through situations, we have to dig even deeper to be able to manage some things. And we'll talk about some of the ways to cope as we go through. So we're seeing sadness and depression and a natural response to grieving loss. People have lost lots of things. There are tangible things that they've lost. There are intangible things that they've lost. And so there are normal reactions to the fact that things that you anticipated and prepared for and worked hard for, all of a sudden, they're just outside of your reach. We're having some normal anxiety reactions. Now, earlier, the Prime Minister, I think, talked about the fact that, I think you were talking about the fact that, again, going back to the new norm, all of a sudden, the things that we prepared for and anticipated and were able to control, those are no longer within our grasp. And so anxiety typically comes from the inability to be able to control and predict how your future, how your day, how your space looks. When that is taken away from you, there is nothing to sort of ground you. So anxiety is a normal reaction that people are having. And anxiety could look very clear and obvious, or it could be very subtle signs. Your stomach just feels unsettled. You just have that sense of doom. You just have that sense of panic. So there are some things that are going on. We need to pay attention to the fact that there are certain populations that we have to be prepared to deal with specifically because they're more vulnerable. I am very concerned about children especially, because children display stress and anxiety and sadness in ways that don't typically reflect that. So they may have behaviors that have changed all of a sudden significantly. They may have behaviors that seem disruptive. They may have things going on with them that seem off. And so we have to pay attention to the fact that children are responding to this just like adults are. Children very much need structure and routine. And structure and routine are the things that keep them focused and keep their anxiety levels stressed. And so in a child's day, structure and routine is there. They get up, there's preparation, there's going to school, there are things that happen in school, there's what the end of school day looks like, there's what the end of the day looks like in terms of homework and perhaps bed and so forth. So there's a structure. All of a sudden, this is not available to children. And I'm not sure how much of it they understand, and I'm not sure how much of it is explained to them, but they're certainly in a situation where their own levels of anxiety and stress and sadness are going to be there. So we have to pay attention to certain populations. I talk about the family again. We have to pay attention to the fact that families are distressed financially, emotionally, and so there is going to be an impact on how children are dealt with in families. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to cope. We are going to have to cope for we don't know how long. And so it means then that we're going to have to reframe how we look at this and how we look at our control in this situation. So there are positive ways that we can cope, and there are ways that we want to stay away from when we talk about coping. And again, as we go through the discussion, we'll get into some of those. But just in terms of pointing out a few things, just in terms of coping, having a sense of gratitude, helping others, acceptance, reframing. Just let me explain a couple of these just before I go into some more. Helping others, paying attention to other people, helps to shift the focus from what is going on internally. Now, if you are in a situation where you're focused on your challenges and on your grief and on your loss, you just have that internal dialogue with yourself that just continues to ruminate. It's just that. When you shift your focus outside of that and shift it to another arena, shift it to giving something to somebody else or doing something for somebody else, you'd be surprised at what that does in being able to sort of interfere with that cycle of victim, being the victim and feeling sorry for yourself. So that is a healthy way to cope. gratitude, being able to move your focus outside of the things that you've lost and the things that aren't working to the things that are working. And it takes a little bit more effort to be able to look at what good things could possibly come out of this. But it means then that you're pushing yourself to a point of being able to have a different experience. And basically that is what we want to do in this situation. Reframing simply is the ability to take a picture and look at it in a different way. We're not saying to change the picture. We're not able to change financial realities right now for many people. We're not able to change what is going on in the world. We're not able to change the fact that COVID is here. But reframing is something that we have power over. We have the ability to take a situation and look at it from a particular way, which then helps to shift our internal dialogue and our mood. So, you know, again, as we go through, we'll talk about some of those. We have to make sure that in this situation where there is so much going on and there's so much of our coping and managing depends on our ability to dig deep and be able to, find things to be able to help us through. It is important for us to remember that we ought not to make too many big changes in times like these, because we are already having to use all of our resources to be able to manage, to be able to get through, to be able to adopt and adjust to our new norm. So it is not a good thing to have to make big changes in your life at this stage. It's important for us when we're talking about coping to use things like structure in our day, use humor, be intentional with how we care for ourselves. We want to make sure that people don't overdo. We want to make sure that people don't use too much alcohol to be able to sort of deal with things. We want to make sure that people don't use unhealthy mechanisms to soothe themselves or get into compulsive or risk-taking behavior. So again, these are some of the things that we want to talk about as we go through. But in terms of just creating a context, I wanted to be able to bring that to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your important input and comments. We are coming close to the news time, so I just wanted to put a question out there for the panelists to consider while we take the break. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably a common theme throughout all of the presentations. It's to do with public health and immunity and building up our resiliency to deal with this pandemic. Dr. David Katz, a lead U.S. public health expert, suggests that we should use the pandemic new normal to educate people about healthy lifestyles so that we can build natural protections against the impacts of this and future viruses. He suggests that we have to build our immune systems as a society because germs are ever present. 80% of all chronic diseases and premature death are preventable by implementing lifestyle changes. 98 to 99% of the COVID-19 cases are mild. Most people don't even know they have it. It is severe in old people and sick people. However, lots of young people suffer from obesity, hypertension, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes as a result of their lifestyles and eating habits. Dr. Katz recommends that we eat well, sleep well, exercise, and those actions can help to protect our people against the health impacts of infectious diseases such as COVID-19. He argues that we must fortify immunity to the virus by affecting how our immune systems respond. He also argues that in every crisis there's an opportunity, and there's no better time for us to get healthy as nations and to develop a national health promotion campaign as is this time. He used the term making lemonade from lemons. And what I want to know generally is there a plan or is there some sort of idea so that we can become a healthier nation from this? Not just abstract, but an actual plan to educate people about living, eating the right way and exercising and so forth. That's generally to everyone in the panel. To Minister Hamilton, do you believe the Ministry of Health, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, could implement, for example, an Eat Better, Eat Local campaign or something similar to promote healthy lifestyles which can then work in alignment with increasing local consumption. Because if, for example, you say, listen, eating local fish is good for your health rather than eating imported fish that we don't know what they are, then it could go along with the Eat Local and Eat Healthy campaign. And Prime Minister, is the government willing to take, I've heard you speak on it before, but an unpopular step to increase, for example, taxes on sugary and other unhealthy foods to discourage consumption so that we can become a healthier country? And for you, Mrs. Blake, for your question to think about during the break, we know that mental health also impacts physical health. So what actual projects would you recommend or would like to see implemented by the government to prevent an increase in mental health issues arising from the pandemic in the short term and generally preventing mental health issues in the long term? So just a little food for thought while we take the break, and we'll now go to the Win FM News and see you all right thereafter.
Found the sound. 98.9 Win FM.
We now bring you the Win FM Headline News. The Win FM Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, Carib Brewery, CNC Trading.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Or 469-5303. DLU Walwyn, people you can trust.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world. Whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous, you can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air. We get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises, telephone number 466-9595.
Without limits, happy and free. The skin you're in with no apology. The one to seize the day. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. With LLB. Live, love, be. Live, love, be. Be who you know you can be. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. Angostura, lemon, lime and bitters. Live, love, be.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts, offering 24-hour nursing, therapeutic and residential care for older adults? It's situated at Otley, 7 miles east of Vastair in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodation to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020, fax 466-8221, or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com, or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
The fire service is reminding citizens and residents that it is still illegal to light fires on their premises, even now that people are sheltering in place from the COVID-19 virus. Fire Chief Everett Ogaro gave the reminder to WinFM, as the service has been receiving calls about fires in residential areas since the lockdown started.
Well, what has been happening is that we think this is one of the effects from the pandemic, is that, people are home, spending more time home, and so we're finding that we're responding to a number of cases where persons are just happen to be burning garbage instead of, securing the garbage and discarding it whenever the appropriate authorities comes around who's responsible for doing that. Most of the persons think it best to burn, and so we want to admonish persons that are under no circumstances that should you burn anything. They should basically seek the advice of the fire services before you attempt to burn anything. So we've seen a lot of small fires, garbage fires, and some wildfires during the period that we've been having this pandemic. But most of the bother that we have have been having is persons who are getting into the habit of burning garbage.
Just recently at the NEOC Daily Media Brief, Superintendent Cromwell Henry spoke to the issue. The fire service is not immune to the effects of the virus, Ogaro tells Win, highlighting that changes were made to prevent a spread at their office and to follow with the social distancing protocols.
Well, Corona has affected us like any other organization. What we would have done is that we would have to we had to make changes to a number of things. We have had to put a number of measures in place. We've had to reduce the size of shifts. We've had to reduce the number of hours that men work. We had to establish robust sanitizing programs at different stations. So we had to make sure that we have the appropriate gear if we are called on to respond to any situation that would involve COVID. So, it has affected us in a way that we would have had to make a number of changes and add a number of new measures to how we normally operate.
Ogaro gave a comparison of statistics for 2018 and 2019, with last year seeing a decrease.
For 2019, we saw a small decrease in the number of fires. In fact, for 2019, we had 623 fires. As opposed to 2018, we had 693. So basically, we had a reduction of about 10.1% in fires for 2019. So what we have done, we have a comprehensive fire prevention program that is ongoing. This involves us going out and spreading the important information of fire prevention, advising and educating, the general public as to what are the types of measures to have in place that would help to prevent fires. We have an annual fire prevention program where we engage a number of kids, and a major part of the program is to teach how to prevent fires, teaching fire tips, what measures you should have in place at home, at school, or whatever that would help to prevent a fire. And so we are attributing the reduction that we've had in fires in 2019 to these programs.
Fire Chief Everett Ogaro speaking with WinFM.
On Friday, 1st May, a May Day without parades and marches. No scenes of jubilation for the gains made for workers' rights over the years. COVID-19 put paid to that. In St. Kitts and Nevis, May Day, Workers' Day, Labor Day, is usually celebrated on the first Monday in May. This year, that holiday Monday is on lockdown, as the state, with 15 confirmed cases and 6 recoveries as of early Friday afternoon, continues to battle to contain the spread of the novel coronavirus among the local population. No address sent to the media and deafening silence from unions on the islands as of news time on Friday. Director General of the International Labour Organization ILO, Guy Ryder, referenced the latest ILO COVID-19 monitor and offered a stark picture of realities facing workers across the globe this May Day 2020.
We now see that the reduction in working hours globally will reach 10.5% in the second quarter of this year. And that means, based on an assumption of a 48-hour working week, that means the loss of the equivalent of 305 million full-time jobs in the world. Let me repeat that number, 305 million full-time jobs.
The job losses are across all regions, with predictions that Americas will have a 12.4% decline in the labor market. People in the informal sector are to be the hardest hit, the ILO reported.
What we find and report in this monitor is that of the 2 billion informal workers of the world, about 1.6 billion have suffered massive damage to their ability to earn a living and to support themselves and their families because of the current COVID-19 crisis. Concretely, we've seen that in the first month of the crisis, that we estimate a drop of 60% in the income of informal workers around the world. That's the global average. And if you break it down regionally, well, Africa and the Americas are the hardest hit, and there the drop in informal economy incomes is in excess of 80%.
There is some improvement on the COVID-19 impact on enterprises, down from 81% to 68% since the last monitor due to relaxations on lockdowns in China, but some 436 million enterprises worldwide are deemed as high risk as a result of COVID-19.
The wholesale and retail business, they are the manufacturing sector, they are accommodation and food services, and they are real estate and administrative and business services. The figures there for enterprises, for example, in the wholesale and retail business, which is the hardest hit, is the expectation that 232 million enterprises are at risk of severe disruption. Colleagues, these are the basic outlines of what is contained in the report. It shows, I think, in the starkest possible terms, that the jobs employment crisis and all of its consequences is deepening by comparison with our estimates of 2 weeks ago. The longer term trajectory of the pandemic and its economic and social consequences, of course, remain to be determined. These figures, I reiterate, relate to the second quarter of this year. It's quite another matter and not something which we attempt at this point to forecast where the global economy will be, for example, at year's end.
Citizens and residents are being urged to protect themselves from the deadly novel coronavirus, COVID-19. The call was made by a national of St. Kitts and Nevis who is residing in the United States and has recovered from what is believed to be the coronavirus. While he articulated his symptoms and treatment to Win FM, U.S.-based Joe Mason says that not only in St. Kitts and Nevis but in New York, people are disobeying the stay-at-home measures.
People are not following orders. They're not following the safe orders that is given by the authorities. So people still are in New York going about their business. I mean, I took a run out. I've been out about twice, and the highways are still full. I mean, the streets are still full with cars. You go to the stores, they have those stores that open still have long lines. People still on the street, 2, 3 people walking together. I mean, nobody's actually, obeying orders. So, I mean, New York, the stuff spreads so much in New York that
I mean, I don't necessarily have to think that they are invincible, but for some reason, you know, this stuff spread so much in New York that I actually think that if we had to obey orders, you know, it would not spread as much.
A number of petitions and divisions are residing in New York, the epicenter of the outbreak. And Mr. Mason has been telling WinFM what it is like living in the center of the outbreak.
That's something that we're trying to figure out. I was at a gathering the day I felt a little oozy, like we say on the fishing boat. The day I felt oozy, the night before I was at a public gathering. One person from the public gathering also had the virus, you know, so we don't know if it's that gathering that I actually, you know, contract the virus, you know, whereas we were moving about regularly right before. Like I say, I had mine very early. I had mine 5 weeks ago, you know, so it wasn't as prominent as it is now, where people was wearing masks and all that kind of stuff. So we were moving around regularly at that particular point. So you can, I really can't pinpoint exactly where I contracted or where I got it from or anything like that.
While expressing a sense of gratitude to the Prime Minister for his handling of the situation, Mason wants more to be done so people can understand the implications of their actions.
Well, my thing is this: I look at the BBC News with the Prime Minister St. Kitts on there, and you have to really commend him for the way he handled the St. Kitts situation, because he put everybody on lockdown, which is very good, and he enforced it, as a matter of fact, you know, versus over here, we had the same thing here, but it was not enforced. That's the reason why it spread so much. So as a result, we have more containment in St. Kitts than other places who wouldn't obey orders. You know, for someone who actually have it, if you know you have it, just stay in isolation. Don't infect anybody else, because one person can infect multiple people, because it's a chain reaction that goes on and on. So anyone who know that they have any kind of symptoms of the coronavirus, just go and isolate yourself, you know, as soon as possible to avoid it being spread.
Mr. Mason expressed his condolences to the family of one of his friends who died of the virus in the U.S.
I know one personally, who was Ms. Thompson, you know, and I spoke to her family, you know, but the COVID-19 is something, like I say, I had people in my corner, is something that you really, really have to fight. You know, you really have to drink a lot of fluids and actually eat. You have to do that. And apparently, I mean, they were talking to her about these things once she contracted the disease and the virus, I should say. And I mean, she did very limited, you know, stuff of that nature. You know, I mean, also, if you have a pre-existing condition, you know, I mean, a lot of us black folks are known to have diabetes, you know, heart, high blood pressure, all that kind of stuff. If you have pre-existing condition and you're older, let's say upper 50s, 60s, 70s, I mean, you can succumb to the virus, you know, because the chart I looked at the other day was, I'm in my 50s, so I'm in the 9% bracket. You're in your 60s, I think 60 to 70 is 25% bracket, 70 and above is 26% bracket. And then you look at those in the 40s, 30s, 20s come down is like in the single digit, you know, of survival rate.
The former Sadler's resident spoke to the issue of asymptomatic people, as he is suspected to have contracted the virus from such an individual.
But there's a lot of people who actually carry the virus, but you're not going to show any symptoms, especially young folks. The young folks will carry it, but they're not going to show any symptoms whatsoever. I mean, the older you are, the more more symptoms that you actually show. You know, so that's another thing to where younger folks, they're out there in the basketball court. The city has to go and take down the basketball hoops and stuff like that because they're still playing basketball. You know, because they don't show no signs of it, but they're actually carrying it.
Up to News-2 Friday, there were 9 remaining positive cases, with a further 6 deemed to have recovered.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott. Attorney Wayne Monroe QC is calling for the health minister to tender his resignation for breaching the emergency order. This as scores of Bahamians have been placed before the courts, also for breaching the order.
firstly, Dr. Sands says, I take responsibility. When a politician says that, if what they do amount to a breach of the law, what necessarily happens is they then tender their resignation.
Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands came under heavy fire on Thursday after it was revealed that he gave the go-ahead for 2 Americans who are Bahamas residents to enter the country after they donated 2,500 double swab diagnostic test kits for COVID-19. However, Monroe argues that under the emergency powers order, the health minister nor the competent authority can make that decision. The order stipulates that except with the prior written permission of the competent authority, all airports, including private airports, shall be closed to international flights carrying passengers, and no visitors shall be permitted to enter and disembark for any reason.
So let us say that you are on a cargo flight, a cargo ship, you enter. You can't disembark. You can't get off. And the getting off isn't subject to the permission of the competent authority at all. It's just you can't disembark.
Monroe stressed that this same order prohibits Bahamians stuck abroad from coming home. The health minister also revealed the flight was only approved for delivery of those items, and he was blindsided by the donor's request to disembark. That explanation did not sit well with CEO of Sky Bahamas and Butler's Aviation Captain Randy Butler, who said that this is highly unlikely.
It's mind-boggling. The whole thing about the story about how the plane gets you, that can't be. It's impossible for that to happen because of the security measures in place before COVID-19 procedures. If I'm coming from Andros, and I call up Nassau Approach, and they do not have a flight plan on file, they, in no other words, can say, no 333 Delta Fox, maintain your distance outside of the Nassau control.
Meanwhile, Monroe said he believes the decision was not made by Sands alone. Monroe is also calling for the identity of the donors to be revealed. Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Miguel Favre for NBC Prime. Since this COVID-19 pandemic began, we've heard a lot from our Chief Medical Officer, the Prime Minister, and other ministers of government. But questions have been asked. Where is the Health Minister? Well, we found Senator Mary Isaac prior to this morning's sitting, and she explains her whereabouts.
Well, I was in the Senate last week or the week before, yeah? And I know that it is really the CMO that gives you the update, and she has been doing a fabulous job. All our frontline workers has been doing a fantastic job. So we know that the country is in good hands.
Now, we asked the Minister for an update on St. Lucia's testing capabilities. More specifically, St. Lucia ran out of testing reagents about a month ago, forcing health officials to revert to reliance on the Caribbean Public Health Agency, or CARPHA.
Well, I think there's just a little glitch right now. The reagents is the problem, getting the what you need to actually do the testing. But that is usually rectified on a day-by-day basis. As we get the equipment, as we get the chemicals we need, we continue testing.
But was this avoidable? The World Health Organization continues to preach test, test, test as the only means of obtaining true infection numbers and containment of COVID-19. Venezuela recently donated thousands of rapid test kits to the OACS nations of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua and Barbuda, as well as Dominica and Grenada. Unlike St. Lucia, these countries have been consistent with their support for the Maduro-led Venezuela at the OAS level. St. Lucia, on the other hand, has aligned with the Lima Group. We asked the health minister whether this alignment was a possible reason for St. Lucia being overlooked.
I do not know that, and I do not even know the quality of those testing kits. So we have to be very careful who we get what from.
We posed the same question to St. Lucia's Foreign Minister, Sarah Flood-Bobra.
Now, you are mixing two things. One thing is something that the minister said. I didn't hear exactly what she said, so I can't.
She confirmed that we're out of reagents for testing.
I can't comment on that. Secondly, I don't think that there's only one source in the world where we can find the supplies we need, and we've always been very adamant on Venezuela. We know why our position has been that way. It's based on principle, and I've explained this many times. And what we need to understand that a little difficult time, a little hardship, a little challenge doesn't mean we need to violate our principles if we believe them. Thank you very much. I don't want to be late. Have a good day.
What's obvious is that the other, quote, sources in the world have not pulled through, as of course St. Lucia's COVID-19 testing is still being undertaken in Trinidad and Tobago. Besides, the United States, with whom St. Lucia appears to have allied against Venezuela, has their own issues securing testing kits on a domestic level. From outside the House of Parliament, I am Miguel Favre for NBC Prime.
This is Al Jazeera.
Now, while many businesses have had to shut down because of the coronavirus crisis, zoos have had to keep in place a few staff to take care of the animals. The UK government is working on a fund to support its 141 zoos and aquariums, which have suffered a financial setback. But as Charlie Angela reports, some say it won't be enough to cover their losses completely.
Mungo is the oldest resident of one of the UK's smallest zoos, a territorial animal blissfully unaware of the fragility of his situation. Cedars Nature Centre is home to 25 different species. Built for the local community, it is a labour of love. But not being a charity, it's fallen through the cracks when it comes to financial aid from the government. With no visitors, income has disappeared, but the cost of keeping the animals remains the same. And with no funds to fall back on, they are relying on donations. If they can't reopen by the summer, the future is bleak.
We've only got a couple of species here which other centres would want, but we're in exactly the same boat as plenty of other small species zoos. Everyone would be in a position where they're trying to offload their animals and find new homes for them. Apart from our armadillos and our zorillas, none of the big centres will want our animals, and we'll have no other option. They'll have to be euthanized.
The more established and higher profile zoos have a stronger chance of staying afloat, but the pressure is still immense.
Zoos like Marwell are frantically fundraising, securing bank loans and furloughing staff to try and see them through the crisis. And while the government support package is welcome, it is limited in scope.
Negotiating on behalf of the sector is the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums.
We've been working with the government support scheme. We don't think it's going to be enough for all, especially for the long term. We think it may be enough to just get past the crisis, but zoos as a sector will need long-term investment.
But there are also thousands of zoos around the world that can't rely on donations or government help. Uganda Wildlife Education Centre is home to 280 animals. Right now, this orphaned elephant's biggest problem is loneliness, but soon it may be food.
When we closed, the implication was that no coin was coming in, as we speak right now, because money was coming in through gate collections, accommodation, restaurant, specialized programs. Those are not happening anymore.
Even if the lockdown ends soon, tourism will take time to recover. In the meantime, virtual tours are springing up and online donation pages, hoping to secure enough support until gates can reopen. Charlie Angela, Al Jazeera, Hampshire.
Singapore will start easing restrictions from May 12th after being under a partial lockdown for 2 months. Selected businesses will start operating again and small groups of students will be allowed to return to school. The Health Ministry says rules are being relaxed gradually to avoid a new spike in infections. Singapore has reported more than 17,000 cases. Most are said to be foreign workers living in crowded accommodation. India has announced it will be mandatory for all public and private sector employees to use a government-backed coronavirus tracking app. The government is targeting at least 100 million phones. Such moves by Asian governments are raising privacy concerns among people, but medical authorities say tracking software has helped slow transmission. Sarah Clark has our report from Hong Kong.
When Tricia Cowan and her family returned to Hong Kong in April, they were put in mandatory quarantine for 14 days. They were also required to wear this electronic wristband that alerted authorities if they breached their quarantine regulations and left their apartment.
To be honest, I didn't even think about it. I just think that this had to be done. I mean, people need to be tracked and no one wants it spread further. We all want it to be over as quickly as possible, so that just didn't bother me.
The tracking technology, developed in Hong Kong, uses a Wi-Fi network to detect if the user changes location. But the company says the only data shared with the government is movement, not personal information.
Technology, we have a lot of options, like face recognition and speech recognition. But using this way, the government will be alert when the user left their home. But at the same time, it protects their whereabouts.
Mobile apps and digital surveillance are being used by many governments in Asia to track the spread of the coronavirus. China uses a colour-based QR code to monitor people's movements and health. In South Korea, overseas travellers who don't download a government app are refused entry.
I think it's a key part in terms of infection control, in Asia especially, using this technology to track down these people and putting them into quarantine. So it is probably one of the most important reasons why we are doing better than other parts of the world.
But critics say some government-mandated apps can also access a user's personal data and be used as a surveillance tool.
There's a real fear that this data will end up in the hands of governments. Some of the apps look for people's location data. They use access to their cell phone records, their call records, even their contacts, and in some cases the camera. And all that information together can reveal very sensitive insights into people's lives.
Two of the world's biggest tech giants, Google and Apple, plan to embed new features in their devices using contact tracing technology. Both say the tool will be removed once the pandemic ends, but critics say it could lead to ongoing surveillance, with governments using the data for other purposes. Technology may be playing a critical role in containing the pandemic, but human rights groups warn it may also normalise surveillance in the future once this outbreak is under control. Sarah Clark, Al Jazeera, Hong Kong.
That was the Win FM Headline News, brought to you by KDP Enterprises, Caribbean Alliance, Carrie Brewery, CNC Trading, The Grange.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts, offering 24-hour nursing, therapeutic and residential care for older adults? It's situated at Otley, 7 miles east of Vastair in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodation to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020, fax 466-8221, or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com, or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Without limits, happy and free. The skin you're in with no apology. The one to seize the day. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. With LLB. Live, love, be. Live, love, be. Be who you know you can be. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. Angostura, lemon, lime, and bitters. Live, love, be.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world. Whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous, you can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air. We get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises, telephone number 466-9595.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Dealing well with a low reputation and service for second to none. Securing you is our mission. People that you can trust, your business, property, we got you covered. Motor or personal, whatever it is, we got you covered. 130 years in this business, we got you covered. For all your insurance needs, visit or call us at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Dealio Walwyn, people you can trust.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
People make the world go
As social distancing becomes the norm of our everyday life, the Cable wants you, our customer, to know that we are here for you every day. Just log into us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us your feedback at email customerservice@thecable.biz. Visit our website www.thecable.net. It's also nice to know you can pay your bills at a distance, online at all commercial banks, or at www.thecable.net/pay. Now's the time to try online banking. It's ultra easy. Call us at 465-2588, 662-7742, or 763-0184. The Cable. We're here for you.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Good afternoon to all. You are listening to the second half of Inside the News on Win FM. My name is Garth Wilkin, and I'm your host for today's program. The Win FM family is pleased to have in studio today the Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, Minister of Health and Agriculture, the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, and Mrs. Michele de la Coudray Blake, the Director of the Counseling Department in the Ministry of Social Services. Good afternoon, Ministers and Mr. Blake. Mrs. Blake.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Garth, and to all the listeners.
The theme for today's program is mitigating the economic and socio-psychological impacts of COVID-19. And that is what guided our discussions this morning. Before the break, I put a question to the panelists, to each of them, in relation to creating a healthier nation moving forward as one of the positives in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The questions were generally, what programs can we actually implement to market to the people and convince them that we should be a healthier nation so that we can become less vulnerable to viruses and diseases generally, and this type of pandemic, if it were to ever show its face again. To Minister Hamilton, I was asking, do you believe that the Ministry of Health, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, should implement an Eat Better, Eat Local campaign or something similar to promote healthy lifestyles, which can then work in alignment with what the Minister has promoted as Eat Local, Buy from the Local Fishermen and Women campaign? And Prime Minister, taxing anything is an unpopular decision. But sometimes we have to look at the benefit of the society as a whole rather than the few who might complain. Is the government willing to take such an unpopular step to, for example, tax sugary foods or other unhealthy foods? I mean, I might be personally offended because no one loves a $2 bread and tin cheese more than me. But if the tin cheese now is double in price, Prime Minister, I might have to pass on that. And, you know, I think as a people we have to reflect and think and take these opportunities, I should say, to reset and look at what is important. And I think over the last couple months we've realized how important our health is. I mean, there are very little people who have not at least indirectly known of someone who has either contracted the virus or has died. And I think when these events happen, we really need to click a reset button in our heads and start to think, what can we do to be better on the other end of this? And I think that this public health issue should be high on the agenda. And to Mrs. Blake, mental health goes directly in line with physical health. And what do you recommend can be implemented as a public policy or program to ensure that there's not an increase, because there are going to be people that are going to be depressed. There are people whose mental health is going to suffer because of this. And what can we do to help those people from a practical standpoint? I would love to get your input. Honorable Prime Minister, I know in your usual addresses and meetings at Government House, you typically want a lot of questions and then you start to answer. I don't know if you want us to approach this afternoon that way. I'm giving you the leeway to decide that.
I am actually in your hands. It will be refreshing to hear from the callers. So if they are ready, we can, of course, go.
Yes.
And I could quickly, though, if you will, speak to the issue of the health and the food matter that you raise. And my quick response to this is that as a region, we suffer long and daily with respect to non-communicable diseases. And much of this can be prevented by proactive action on the individual's part. Lifestyle is at the heart of many of the non-communicable diseases. That is what we eat, what we drink, what we do. We engage in risky behaviors, etc., etc. Those things, though the power lies in us, the power lies in us to be able to rectify them. There has long been the contention what is important, and we say the health of the nation is the wealth of the nation. So for us, it is not a zero-sum game. A functioning society needs a strong economy, and a strong economy needs healthy, productive people to support it, to maintain it. And of course, only a healthy economy in the end could be able to respond to the health challenges and keep, as it were, modernizing the health sector. That is why, because we had had a good track record of fiscal management, having paid off the IMF debt, we were able to date to have committed over $25 million extra to a health budget, which was significantly around $70 million. So we are going towards $90+ million if all other things were to remain the same with respect to the health sector. The matter of the local food in this COVID fight, one of the prescriptions is that we boost our immune system, improve upon our intake in particular of vitamin C. Of course, the sleeping and all of those things are good. In this COVID fight, there's a specific prohibition in that the liquor license have been repealed. And part of the reason for that is to ensure that people do not engage in risky behaviors as a consequence of the consumption of alcohol. So we are seeing how all these parts get together. One of our disappointments is that as a country, we are not producing enough fruits and vegetables for a sufficient long period of time during the year. So we need people to get back into orchard development, into mangoes and guavas and limes and all of those things, and to have them for a significant period of the year. And that will call for technology being involved rather than the traditional methods of farming. The principal question as it relates to alcohol has been answered in part, and of course tobacco. The CARICOM had set itself as a health priority to increase taxes on those two as a way of reducing consumption. At least 2 countries had gone that part. One, I think, was Dominica. The other could have been Grenada, and Barbados was contemplating. What we had said, those were going to be the models. We would look at the studies of the results to see whether that had led to any significant indent, reduction in the consumption of alcohol or cigarettes. And certainly if that is what is required, we are prepared to go that way. Difficult as it has been, because we have been a government so far that has not introduced one single new tax, and in fact has been reducing them. But because I have said consistently that the health of the nation is our priority, we will do all that it takes to get our people there, adding not just fiscal measures, but a more vigorous public education program.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And Garth, your question borders on, and I could capture it in one word, prevention. And the father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, some 2,500 years ago, did make the statement, he has written more than 70 books, and he's considered to be the father for that reason, especially the fact that he has saved Athens from a plague. And he's well noted for his work in medicine. He said that all diseases start in the gut. And over time we realized that, not while completely true, because I suppose you can say this particular disease did not start in the gut. Of course, the metabolic diseases do start in the gut. And so he's right for that on that particular point. And I want to add that because of that, we have to pay attention to what we put in our guts. The word gut and gutless go together, right? So when you're gutless, you have to be careful what it is doing to do harm to your body. So because you are supposed to protect the gut, where most of those bacteria live that take care of this body of yours, fight to keep you alive, we should not be doing things to do damage to our bacteria in our gut. And we do it every day. We do it every day, some carelessly, some deliberately. And we do it every day. And so your question about prevention is a good one. And what I will say is this. The Ministry of Agriculture has been every year promoting an Eat Local event. In fact, we have an entire day dedicated to eat locally, eating local. And we serve lunches on that day, all local produce. Every year that is done in St. Kitts and Nevis. Maybe more now. This pandemic teaches us that we have to do a greater focus on other things, but true, we do that in collaboration with all of the ministries, Ministry of Tourism, even we have what you call the restaurant day. We do a lot of that kind of promotion. But you're right. We eat all of these things. We are becoming so obese. In our schools today, there's a prevalence of about 40% obesity. That is a frightening number, because we know that because of obesity, we can have all of these chronic diseases coming down in our society. And certainly, the cost of treating chronic diseases is astronomical. It could bankrupt a family. It could bankrupt a country. And so we have to begin to educate our youth. The ministers of government sometimes take children out for lunch. Somewhere around November, I think it is. And sometimes you look at what they order, and you recognize that there needs to be an education of children into what really to eat, because we are contributing to the obesity, diabetes that flows from that, the hypertension, the blood pressure, the kidney disease. And talking about kidney disease, Garth, we 3 years ago when I went to Taiwan, we set up with the Taiwan's Veterans General a program which is to train our nurses, train our doctors here and in Taiwan. A program lasting 3 years, teaching them how to identify persons at the point of service at the health centers, how to identify persons who are at risk for kidney diseases, kidney failure. Because we recognize over 100 persons are now so affected. There was at one point only 1 or 2 persons used to be having kidney problems. Now we have over 100. You know what happened to people like Eli Matz, sorry to call his name, but he had to look services abroad. And so we have set up that in this country in the last 3 or 4 years, where we can now identify those who are at risk and chart a course, a program of what they should be eating to be able to divert from becoming chronically ill with this kidney disease. We have also put equipment, machines, additional machines at the hospital to do the dialysis so that we can help those who are already at that point. But primarily it comes from the food, what we're eating. And the more we pay attention to what we eat, the greater will be the chances of us to be able to fight off this disease. You know, there's a chap by the name of Dr. Arod, I forget his name. Anyway, the name will come back to me. He has indicated that there are at least 3 vitamins that we should be paying close attention and really taking to be able to help fight off this particular COVID. He's an MIT graduate, a PhD from MIT. So I read, listened to him too. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C. All we have those same vitamins in the food we grow. They are in the food we grow. They are in the eggs, in the mango, the kale, the squash, the greens, the carrots. And we are growing them here. And you know what is good, Garth? We have an institution in agriculture that tests the quality of the soil in which we plant. We gather the information about where to plant, where it's best to plant a particular crop. It is available. And so that we do the testing of the soil to inform farmers not to over-medicate their products. And when the food is grown, we also test it. And we have a 99% good quality, better sometimes than the food that we import from overseas. And so all our hotels and restaurants should be buying the local food to help to improve the health of the people who are in St. Kitts and Nevis. And of course, the vitamin D, all you have to do is go in the sun. Because you're here, you must stay in your home, don't mean you mustn't go out in your yard. Vitamin D is from the sun, just go in your yard, even if you have to lie down on a cot. You know, of course, you do a little walk around, make it a little better, of course. And then, of course, I suggested planting a tree. Oranges are great, grapefruit are great, sweet peppers, you have broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, tomatoes, cauliflower, cantaloupe. Those things help you with your vitamin C. Of course, you could go to the pharmacy and get some vitamin C too. But the point is you have the local foods which have those things in it, and all we have to do is to consume. And I'm not saying to overeat. I'm not saying to be the gutless. And you remember I mentioned gut a while ago. I'm just saying, just eat what is local, help to boost your immune system, and it will help to fight the COVID disease. And so I appreciate the opportunity to strengthen those who are planting food. And in addition to that, in your own home, if you plant a tree around your yard, providing guavas, as the Prime Minister mentioned, providing some of those things with vitamin C, you are also contributing to your own health. Don't think you should eat all macaroni. Nothing against macaroni, my friends, but I'm just saying, use the food that gives you this, the vitamins that you need. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Garth, I am so glad you asked that question, because we've been long talking about the connection between physical health and psychological health. So this is a perfect question. When you were calling out the points, when you were indicating about I think you said there was some research and you were calling out some of the points. And the last thing you said was that crisis brings opportunity. So we in mental health see this as an excellent opportunity, because for the longest while we've been trying to destigmatize mental health and talk about it not as an entity separate and apart from physical health, but something that needs to be incorporated. And so this crisis is bringing about the opportunity for us to have that discussion. When I started talking earlier, I talked about the fact that all of us in this situation are being impacted by it, emotionally, psychologically. So the fact that something is happening in this world that is affecting all of us means that ought to help us to recognize that this is not a them versus us kind of situation. It is all of us. And since it is all of us, this is the perfect time to incorporate the discussion of mental health into health, period. And so we think that this is the perfect opportunity for this. So in terms of going forward and what we want to see happen, I think we in St. Kitts are starting to build some really good structures about the education of our health. The minister talked about some of the things. You see people on the road exercising and walking. People pay attention to what's going on with their bodies. People are starting to appreciate the importance of what they put in their bodies. So we are starting to have that awareness. We're starting to talk with our children about it in school. The very little ones in school, they're starting to encourage them to talk about fruits and vegetables. And so I remember one time being in a forum where they were trying to figure out how to get little children to focus more on fruits and vegetables, and encouraging them when they go to the supermarket to tell mommy they want this versus, fruit versus chips or something like that. So the point is, we are starting to do what we need to do to have that conversation. We think this is an excellent time at the start of this to incorporate mental health. So we just look at it as health overall. We have things like I think in Ministry of Health they have like a food pyramid. I think it's important for us to have a mental health pyramid there alongside it, so that you start to have the messages of incorporation. So just in terms of going forward, I'm just going to put just put one concept, and that is we are at an important point and an opportune point to be able to incorporate a message of health overall, including mental health. When we talk to people about what's going on with them, I mean, sometimes you have situations where people are dealing with extreme stress and depression and so forth, and sometimes people don't pick it up, they don't pinpoint it. They come to us when the doctors send them, and the doctors send them because their body is manifesting something. So there is that physical manifestation in the body when something is going on emotionally. Likewise, when we talk to people about how to manage their mental health, we talk to them about getting enough sleep, eating, and exercising. I hear that being discussed here all the time. So we incorporate that into their mental health management. So the point is that there is that connection, and we are at the point where we could have that collaborative discussion. Just in terms of something you asked also about what's going on. All the research indicates that long-term mental health impact from this is going to be there. It's going to be felt for a while. Increase in depression, anxiety, stress, those kinds of things. So we anticipate that for a while there are going to be more presentations of this. It means then that we have to have a response that is adequate to be able to address these needs. One of the things that has presented itself as a result of this happening is that there has been the opportunity for extensive training that has been offered, and people are taking advantage of it. There is something in mental health system called first aid, psychological first aid. The thing here is that there's a recognition that everybody doesn't need the same level of care or the same intervention of care. It's just, for example, like if you have a severe illness, if you have pneumonia, for example, you may have to go to your doctor. But if you have the sniffles, you could take care of it at home with some home remedies, get something basic to take care of it. So too in mental health, there is a spectrum of interventions that people could utilize. And at the very basic level, there is just a simple connection of people meeting people on an emotional level and just sort of validating some of the things that they're experiencing and helping them to get to the next step. So psychological first aid allows for people who don't necessarily have an extensive mental health background to be able to help people through a difficult time. What is happening is that as a result of this, organizations like PAHO, WHO, CARPHA are offering things online where persons could get trained in psychological first aid. It means then that we are going to have more of a varied cadre of people to be able to meet the different needs that are going to come up. And so that is one of the things that we see happening. That's one of the benefits that is coming out of this, one of the opportunities that is coming out of this. So just in terms of, sort of packaging it, what I'm saying is that it's a perfect opportunity for us to be able to incorporate the language and discussion of mental health into an overall health perspective. And what I'm also saying is that we are in the midst of being able to utilize some of the resources that we have so that we have more people to be able to meet the needs that that we anticipate in the future.
Yes, the assumption is that all of these programs and any changes we implement, it comes down to whether we have the dollars and cents to push behind them.
Right.
And just as a transition to another question, Prime Minister, 2 weeks ago, when you were Inside the News, Mr. Bacchus had asked you how much cash the country has in its reserves for this rainy day. And you said that that would be in the audit report. So I actually was listening to the program and I went to search for the audit reports and found the reports from 2016, 2017, and 2018 online. I note that at the end of 2015, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis had an accumulated cash balance of $593 million, EC dollars, consisting of deposits at local banks, deposits at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and fixed deposits of various lengths and interest rates. At the end of 2016, the accumulated cash balance was $681 million. At the end of 2017, it was $702 million. And at the end of 2018, it was $673 million. As Minister of Finance, can you tell us what is the unaudited cash balance at the end of 2019 and what is it now? And has the government, by way of the cabinet, determined how much it is willing to spend of our cash, and I say our cash because the country's cash is our cash, to prevent economic collapse by, one, ensuring working people continue to receive paychecks to purchase medication, pay their rents, car loans, mortgages, and student loans, etc., and two, by otherwise stimulating the economy. This may seem like a technical question, but I think it's important that we know if the decision has been made, what that decision is, and if it's being discussed, what are the considerations as to how much of our reserves do we use as a response, an economic response to the pandemic. And I also want to get the panelists' views because this is an apt question. I was listening to Bernie Sanders on television, and he had suggested that it's cheaper to prevent an economic collapse than to repair the economy after the collapse. Hence the urgent need for a comprehensive stimulus package, which the government has offered in its first stage thus far, but not only for the benefit of laid-off workers or persons who have lost their income, but also for financially feasible small businesses to stay alive. The argument was that we can spend less now to prevent a total collapse, and we would have to spend too much later down if all the small businesses were to break down and people would lose all of their income. And also in relation to that, there have been some questions about in the stimulus package about the allocation of the $30 million from mortgages from the Development Bank, and what was the reasoning behind that part of the package as opposed to using some or all of that money to prioritize supplementing income for those persons that lost their wages rather than giving mortgages, because in the uncertain times ahead, there's going to be less people who are going to be seeking to build homes, more people who are going to be focused on just being able to feed their families. So I just wanted your views on that.
Well, there are several questions, and the truth is the response to the pandemic, we have already said, has to be an all-of-society approach. The government cannot be the chief, as it were, entity to bail out entities. It will not happen, it cannot happen, and it will not happen anywhere. The reality is that even the government flows have reduced significantly as a consequence of some of the very stimulus measures we have proposed. For example, the reduction of the tax by 50% on unincorporated entities, the reduction of the tax by over 33% or thereabout with respect to corporate entities, the foregoing of water payments, inflows, electricity inflows, all of them are substantial. The reduction and removal of VAT from a number of items that had become critical in the context of the fight for COVID. So the government has done as far as it can go, having regard to its resources and commitments at this particular moment in time. And truth, it is only a month, and so we have to really look to see how those measures would sink in. Even without confirming, because I don't have them to reach, the sums that you have outlined, it is important to understand what constitutes the government, as it were, accounts. In the government accounts are substantial sums, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the sums that you would have called out, which belongs to those who have invested in treasury bills, and therefore they can be called upon at any time with substantial consequences. So certainly in our planning and management, while that is something that is there and for which the government pays an interest, we know that that is funds available on demand, and we treat it that way. Because anyone with a treasury bill may choose at a particular point, and although they are time-bound, if someone comes and says, I want to get back my treasury bill, especially at a time like this, you have to be able to respond. And a substantial portion of those so-called reserves are funds that are characterized in that particular way. The government also has investments that are part of its portfolio. Some of them are short-term, some of them are long-term. And therefore, one has to also factor in the consequences of breaking any of those commitments that you may have. What would be the loss at this particular moment in time? And so it is a complex matter that has to constantly be under review. When we started, for example, to build out the largest stimulus package per capita anywhere in the region, we did not contemplate at the time that we would have to invest now somewhat $203,000 to bring home students from Jamaica, but that has now come to the fore. We did not contemplate that we will have to spend as much as $20+ million to get the healthcare system to in a position that if the worst cases were to come, we would be in the best possible place to be able to tackle them. So as we respond to this particular pandemic, there are things seen and unknown which will come on board from time to time, and the government always must retain the flexibility to be able to respond. And equally at this time, the government stand alone as the only major employer that is carrying 100% of its employee, even while they are at home, and we have set that high target for ourselves. The government bill is over $180 million in wages, allowances, people with their pensions and all of that. So what at first glance may look like a lot, in the context of the reality, and by keeping on these people, we are keeping the economy, we are afloat, we are giving them purchasing power. And our wages are significant, $180 million thereabouts. Even before you receive one tax dollar, you know for that particular year that you have to go. The government resources certainly will be used in those targeted areas at this particular moment in time where the government thinks we will have greatest advantage. And some of them are projects that we can now shave. For example, we can let the island resurfacing stay as it is at this particular juncture. You're setting the stage for accidents and other issues. So at the critical areas, those particular projects are going to have to continue. And so the government has its own commitments, which the government must make. The government has been generous. And when we begin to evaluate what this government has done, recognize we do not live in utopia, and we do not live in a world where we are alone. In Trinidad and Tobago, with additional resources because it is oil-rich, the finance minister and the government has made it clear they will not defer one tax. They can't afford to, they claim, because they say at this time when we are spending more, at this time when they are losing revenues, all governments are, and perhaps most entities, perhaps except for supermarkets and other service providers, are losing money. How do you expect us to be deferring our taxes? That is what Colm Albert asked just 2 weeks ago. That is the record. When you look at what St. Kitts and Nevis has done, you marvel at the situation just 15 minutes away from us in Antigua, where the government is saying we will not be able to pay our salaries because our intake of taxes is now little or none. Those are the realities that must bedevil the government and be our first consideration at this particular moment in time. And by attempting to hold our employees, give them their due, ensuring that they can participate in economic life, we are doing what is prudent and necessary at this particular moment in time. Next door in St. Lucia, not too far away, the government has already taken up a position that, listen, we will not pay our wages in cash. We are going to do an IOU sort of arrangement where you will get your some in cash and some by way of a bond or some other instrument of debt from the government. Those are the realities that are so close around us. We marvel at the fact that we have been able to manage to put something aside, the thrift which the minister mentioned, for the rainy day. And if we become callous, if we begin to think that we have a lot, we will find ourselves unable. We don't have the luxury of a President Trump and his administration to be able to just print dollars. In fact, for us to do anything in terms of a monetary policy response, you have to have consensus among the leadership of some 8 entities, and that is not going to come very easy. So all of us, whatever we have to be used it in a guarded way, and that is the approach in which we have done. In terms of our investment follow well-accepted pattern in terms of participation and in terms of entities being able to work in accordance with what the government intended to do. We chose Development Bank because it is in fact part of the public sector response to economic activity in the country. It is Development Bank who is the largest supplier of, for example, financing for our students to go abroad. Largest supplier for all the years of its existence. And it is the entity best willing and able to provide support to the small businesses. They get it there easy. And so that has become an instrument for the government to control its policy. When, for example, in the past, government attempted to do certain initiatives and say, we want this rate applied. Other entities exercise their prerogative and say, well, we can't offer it that rate, or we have to get back this in a return, etc. We were able to get better compliance and congruence with policy in terms of the Development Bank. And let's be clear that those policies had been put and noted in the budget since last year. So it's not that just now we are just doing them. We said we were going to do them. We said that was the mechanism. Nobody else came and said, we want to participate. Indeed, up to now, none has come because they are not prepared to basically do the kind of term sheet that others are prepared to do. And so we just follow through in the context our efforts to bail out. well, not bailout, to assist in providing a stimulus. Our stimulus has been the most comprehensive anywhere in the region. And I think that tells us that we have given it good thought. We have put something that is doable, something that we think is proportionate to the response that is needed at this particular moment in time. To be clear, entities who have been affected are benefiting from this, and other entities are also going to benefit from this. We will see how this pans out in another 2 or 3 months, but clearly this is not a government that goes just throwing away money. Even as we are speaking now, just last week, the government took the decision that we will provide a hot meal for over 4,000 students in our primary school. When we first talk about stimulus package, that wasn't part of it. You can't capture everything in the context of an emergency. But we have to be sufficiently guarded and sufficiently resourced to be able to respond to these imperatives without putting the government back in a hole, back up to its throat in debt, where we become the pariah nation and have to go to the IMF again. We will never go back to the IMF under the circumstances in which we went before. So that is why we have to be careful, and we are carefully looking at it. Up to Friday, just yesterday, I spent over 3 hours with the financial team attempting to look at certain realities. What more can we do? What will we do? Our financial team met probably Tuesday or thereabout with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, as we have been meeting with several other players, because several of them have said to us, the Chamber don't represent us. You're all talking to the Chamber, come talk to us. We are in a different category. They don't represent us, they don't speak for us. But we recognize the importance of all the associations, and we try to make ourselves available for those who feel that they are excluded or not a part of that, and to hear their voice. And in the context of that, at the appropriate time, we will come back again. But we just, less than a month ago, outlined a stimulus package, some of which we have just started to see implemented, because the very implementation had been put on hold or delayed as a consequence of the lockdowns, where people couldn't function well and only some could participate at home. So my advice is to say, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see what can happen and what is the reality. The other point to make in this context, again, as we look at monies, every entity, the government becomes contingently liable for them. So we have to be careful. So when we look at the government, we have to look, wow, what is the state of the other government entities? What is the state of Skellig? What is the state of SCASPA? What is the state of every other entity? Because ultimately, that burden becomes a government burden. And that is why we have to be guarded, and we have been so conscious and so careful with the fiscal management of the country. We understand we need to intervene. We have intervened. We gave the largest per capita stimulus package anywhere in the region. When we were paying people $1,000 at wage support, St. Vincent was giving them an average of $300, $75 a week. Trinidad and Tobago Oil Rich was giving them $603, and so on and so on. So we are ahead of most of them with respect to these. We are paying for students to come. Antigua, who control that, is saying we will facilitate the vehicle, but other people will have to organize. And we would want, just as the government, the first response, and I think this in part the follow-through of the point from Eugene, that has to come in the context of an emergency. We have to look to our own resources. And that is why, however small, we have to begin to put something aside rather than looking for somebody else to intervene. The truth is, with this pandemic, you have little or no grant fund coming in. You have offers of loan financing, but those then have to be repaid. And we have yet as a government determined, based on the financial advice, we will not yet go to take any loans from anybody at this time, because we don't want to get back in the debt trap, because those have to be paid. So we are to, perhaps through our fiscal management, we're at the best place to be able to respond. We want to keep it that way. United States of America is not offering any significant aid to anybody. They have their own troubles. So we have to look within to ourselves. So I've said, give the process time, and as we did, we will come again at an appropriate time to say, having reviewed, because we can't yet make a determination how successful those interventions are with the limited time frame in which they have been operating. What we do know, they have satisfied the requirement of helping the vast majority of people to be able to keep their head above water, to get their food, and to get other things which they need, their medication. And equally, that is why we make the appeal to the landlords. Everyone must show sensitivity. You can't come as a businessman, say, well, government eats upon the tax, but what are you eating upon? Are you eating upon the profit margin you're charging the people for your goods and services, or you're carrying them up in a time of pandemic? It is a shared responsibility to take the country forward. And we are having important consultation with all the actors and making determinations as we go ahead. Because while we have the long picture, things are changing every day. New circumstances are coming, and we have had to give ourselves the flexibility, just as we did with the students. Just as we did when we did the budget in 2020, there were no plans to spend to get, 2,000 now devices for online learning. We have had now to put that in the context of the closure of schools. So there's a lot that has happened even since the stimulus, and which will continue to happen. And we have to exercise the fiscal prudence that has taken us so far. So I'm happy that that question has come. And as we go forward, more discussions will have about that. But we are going to be faithful and prudent stewards of the public coffers, as we have done in the past.
So just to understand clearly, Prime Minister, you are promising the nation, when you're asking them to be thrifty and to tighten their belts, that the government is equally promising that it will be thrifty and will tighten its belts.
Yes, okay. Yes, and we have led by example, and that is why we have been able to respond. Some countries in the Caribbean now, and I don't want to name anybody, lest anybody be ashamed, but you do the research, they haven't even announced a stimulus because there's none to give. And it goes back to what Granny would say, you can't make blood out of stone. There's none to give. So those people are on their own, attempting to fight a good fight. And we hope that they will succeed in the fight. The government will tighten its belt. The government will not be foolhardy. The government will not deliberately get itself into deficit spending, because at some point it catches up with you, as it did with us in 2011. And what was the consequences? 3 years, no increments. 85% increase in electricity up to now. Some business haven't paid off that debt and will never be able to do. Water went up 600%. We had haircut at the bank, haircut at the churches, haircut at the credit union, and some institution never recover from that. Just 2 days ago, to my surprise, a gentleman called me from Anguilla, and he said, we are now looking because, things are tight, Mr. Prime Minister. Somebody gave me your number. But the former government had owed us some money, millions of dollars, and we haven't gotten it back from our investment. We wonder if there's something that you can do. I said, I'm sorry, sir, but that wasn't even part of our contemplation. What you need to do is to write to the financial secretary, and she will give appropriate advice. So even at this time, all things that have happened, people are now bringing them back now as new grievance, that a debt was a debt, is a debt, is a debt. And so these are challenges that we face, and we want to be circumspect And we want to do the right thing for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, as we have done over the last 5 years. What I promise as we go through, as we get further analysis, we are meeting, I think it's Tuesday, as the heads of government level, to share experiences and to look at a number of solutions, number of challenges relating to security, relating to food security, relating to the health sector, relating to coordination with respect to the international financial institution, to see if we could exact more. One of the things the CARICOM leadership is saying, we are the most indebted region, and we can't. We can't, or they don't want to. We may eventually be forced to. We don't want to take on more debt. So when Citi comes and says, I will give you a debt, but I will reduce the interest rate, it is difficult to contemplate. And that is why we ensure that we kept certain things there. There are a lot of projects we could have done, but had we done them today, the conversation would have been different. Today, we would have had no ventilators in our hospitals. Thank God, we have over 6 times more ventilators at JNF than we had before. At Mary Charles, where there was none, we now have. We have increased the stock at Alexander Hospital. All of that we are only able to do because we did not take our eyes off the ball, and we certainly will not. And that is why we have been targeted in terms of the intervention. The poor man will feel the hardest, as he always does, and the poor woman. So we have a response to that. Even while we look at the wage support, there's the PAP program, which thankfully we had introduced maybe 1 year ago, December 2018, or thereabout, which has now come in already. 500 odd applicants have come in, additional to the 4,000 or thereabout that we had before. So we have some support structures. Thankfully, we had a number of entities that are doing the feeding of some of the impoverished people in our country. And we say thank you to them, and we want to continue programs such as those. Our stimulus package to agriculture, again, is to enhance food security and make food available at a cheaper price. So at least we may not have the luxury, but we should be able to eat, and eat something that satisfies our nutritional requirements for safe food. And that is why the government is taking these particular measures, and we will continue to do them. We understand the pride must be given to people again to begin to re-engage. That is why the construction programs are going to continue. And a substantial portion of the people anyway who would become involved with them are persons whose wage is guaranteed. One of the things people say about government, it may not pay big like those private sector firms, but the pay is stable and guaranteed. So those persons would have a better sense of stability and be able to engage. In any event, funds that there can always be redistributed by agreement. So if there's a slack there, we move it in other areas. We have already put aside some for small enterprises. But in this context, again, you have to be so selective as to what enterprises. The point Michele was making about time for big decision, and we're looking where you're at. If, for example, I wanted, given the growth of the tourism industry, to invest in rentals at a time when no tourist is there, is it the appropriate time? So even for the bank with its customers, there has to be a re-educating and as it were, rethinking of priorities for engagement and training people in order to pursue those.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We have a couple of calls, so we're going to go to the phone lines in a second. So I encourage the callers to call in. I'll give you the numbers shortly. But Prime Minister, while we're taking the calls, I just wanted to put a couple more questions to you so that when the calls come in, then we can take the questions and then answer them after. In terms of CBI, I noted from the 2018 accounts that the CBI income was 44% of the government's overall income in 2018. That is quite significant. So my questions in regard to that are, has the CBI team provided an impact assessment to Cabinet yet in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic? And I see that Grenada is actively promoting their program still. What is the plan, or our plan, to keep the CBI program alive given the global economic crisis that is looming? In terms of tourism, in your interview, and I think it was Sky News, you had told the journalist that there are plans in place for a new brand of tourism product. I just wanted to follow up on your statement and ask if that plan do you have any drafts of that plan? Can you share any of those plans with us so that we can have an understanding, because tourism is a very important industry in our country. And would you consider setting up a special bipartisan tourism advisory committee, including tourism business leaders and the former ministers of tourism who are alive, to chart a path forward? I personally feel that having Michael Powell, Dwight Astafan, Ricky Skerritt, and Lindsey Grant in one room could result in a premium plan. I mean, country above self being our motto. So I just wanted to have your thoughts on that. And then, with that said, let's go to the phone lines and hear the questions from the callers.
Hello?
Caller, you on the air?
Good day, lady and gentlemen. A question for us about the psychological effect and the fallout from the virus. Even before the virus, there were concerns about social distancing in another form. I think technology allowed for communication without physical contact. Are you at all concerned that the virus has exacerbated those concerns? And is it that we will have to permanently adjust to the new realities? And a comment, when a leader repeatedly exaggerates and engages in superlatives, when he stretches the truth.
Caller. Sorry, caller.
Yes.
I'm not Mr. Bacchus.
Okay.
We are trying to
Just
focus on some positives.
And I'll finish. That's
yes,
all.
you can save that for the other programs, but in a program that I control, I want to hear questions. I don't want to see anybody attacking anyone. Let us be mature.
This is not an attack. I haven't attacked anyone.
Well, I have taken it as the moderator as an attack, and it can that question or your comment can be taken somewhere else. We want to focus on the actual topic today, and I don't mean to be rude. I think you have very good insight every time that I've been on the program, and your question was a very pertinent question. So it's not a rude interruption. I just want to keep the focus so that we can move forward in a bipartisan manner today, okay? So thank you very much for your question, and we'll stay on the line for an answer to your question.
Could we take a number of callers?
Yes, that's what we're going to do, Prime Minister. Caller, you're on the air?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, this is Mr. Nifel. Let me ask you a question. I got a call from a young man this morning from the country, from Herefordshire, and he's trying to figure out what's going to happen due to the pandemic, how he's going to be able to pay his mortgage. So is there any programs in place? And when are they going to get the PAP and the Social Security? How long are they going to get that?
Okay, thank you, caller. Caller, you on the air?
Yeah. Win FM?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Caller, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, can you put your question, please?
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, sir. You're on the air.
And everybody on the panel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Two heads is better than one. And I like how you and Sean is accountant, and nothing could go wrong. But you see, I said this to say that. So security is a thing when sugar industry used to go. People used to work for small money, 135, 140, and we money used to go down there. And people who were self-employed never want to put no money down there, and some of them used to get more money in their pocket. And why sugar cane people got? Because when we work 7 to 4, from 7 to 12, we used to get 135, 140. If you want extra money, we got to take extra cane field, extra work, extra grass to dig, and different things, Prime Minister. And I like how you're handling everything, and you're working day and night. I sure when you're in your bed, you can't sleep. You're studying how the country must run. I don't hear other countries talking about IMF, right? And I know you ain't going back to that. And if you got to stretch the money like a rubber band, I want you to stretch it. And if you got to cut costs, cut costs. In the next 2 or 3 months coming, and you see things going down the drain, and you see things can't go no further, you know what to do. I know you know what to do. I mean, I got to call you. I know what to do. I could tell you what to do too. You understand?
Thank you.
So that's the problem about it. Don't let nobody come down there who put the not now you Mr. Emery and everything on monitor social security. Because a lot of people, because you talk about surplus, they want to hold all kind of thing and beg all kind of thing and take all kind of thing. You don't let them stress your career. Okay, all the best, Prime Minister.
Thank you much.
Thank you, caller. We have another caller. Caller, you on the air?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This question is for the Minister of Agriculture. Congratulations regarding your projected plans to increase the farming industry in the Federation. However, what is your specific plan for reducing the monkey population simultaneously? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you, caller. Caller, you on the air?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, ma'am. Yes, good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. This is Granny.
Good afternoon, Granny.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for commending me on a job well done in the bus system. That job is doing underneath Honorable Patrick Leibert in Ministry of Transportation. Yes, he outlined there are some package. I don't know who all on the panel. I heard you, I heard a lady, I heard Honorable Eugene Hamilton. So, yes, he underlined some packages that, I mean, yes, he have in store for the busman. Whatever it is, we will be grateful and thankful. Right? Now, listening to the radio station, people are speaking about voting. Soon time for election. I just want to tell people and ask a simple question. If one of think it was hit with a hurricane, would you want to have election? But let me let y'all know this. This is like a hurricane we never see before. This hurricane here blow off people who don't work house roof because they sit down every single day with a mental problem. How can they feed their family? How their family going to eat because they're going to get the next paycheck? So when you are going out there and think about election, the boss, if you want, give me a paper, your whole panel sign it, to say that we want got election until next year, until this date, whenever election is supposed to be, cool, give me it and take it out.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you,
Another
caller.
thing is,
Caller, we're trying to focus. Okay, go ahead.
Pardon?
No, sorry, I was saying we were trying to focus on the economic and
yes,
socio-psychological impacts of the COVID-19.
Okay then, yes, I get into the food part now, right? Where in the world you ever hear anybody say, children gonna be home under this COVID-19 and getting school meals? Nowhere, right? I give you a plus for that. Okay. Because right now, it eases the pressure off of families knowing that they have to cook extra food for their children them because their children them home. Within the fishing and the agriculture sector, I went up the agriculture, I think was Tuesday. Yes, they had some containers up there to buy some feed. Agriculture, them, it is good that it is now time for us to go back to we grow, to plant our own food. But you also have to remember, we ain't got much backyard. Right? Now, knowing that food is so cheap, the bag of food them for the animals them is so cheap. Right? I mean, it gives everybody now an extra hand to deal with their livestock. The gentleman who is here answering the phone, saying caller, he asked a question that I keep on asking all the time. At the end of this, but listening, you know, at the end of this, after this pandemic, if the country reach a certain well, does the country have sufficient funds to bail out anyone? Well, you also answer that. Right? Which, I mean, you said it from 2011.
Caller, sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a few more calls and very little time. So, do you have any other questions for the panel?
Okay, do you think? I'm going to choose another night.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, then, you're welcome.
All right, and we lost that call. Prime Minister, I have received a few, and panelists, I've received a few questions online. So I just wanted to put them, and then everyone can deal with their particular questions. In terms of Minister Hamilton, a question was asked: if we do increase the fish supply, will the government be in a position to tax the foreign supply of fish so that the local fish is actually cheaper? The other question is for the Prime Minister. The question is, there was talk about massive haircuts that private citizens took some 10 years ago. Currently, there is a pause on the purchasing of treasury bonds. What are your thoughts on crowdfunding of capital projects with a modest return on investment by persons or businesses who indicate an appetite for investment in this economic downturn? This initiative would stem to not only curb the entitlement mentality, but will allow persons to be more invested in public infrastructure. I have another question or suggestion for Honorable Minister Hamilton. Would you be in a position to reintroduce a reconfigured SIMACO or similar entity for promoting food security by providing an avenue for all farmers to systematically market to their consumers, notwithstanding that the institution may have failed to accomplish this before? If so, what would you have done differently? And one more question in terms of Prime Minister, your fellow Prime Minister Mia Mottley was on CNN the other day and spoke of CARICOM seeking funding and felt that it was unfair that certain international agencies only provide funding based on historical GDP data. And she was advocating on behalf of CARICOM that there be a vulnerability index to determine how international organizations provide aid. I know you spoke about that, you said that taking loans should be the last resort, but I'm sure we would be willing to take aid. I just wanted to know if St. Kitts was aligned with that CARICOM strategy of seeking aid based on our vulnerability. I think that extends to the fact that we are more so susceptible to hurricanes and other natural disasters, even though we might not be the poorest countries in the world. So I just wanted your input on that. And we will take one more question from the phone lines, and then we'll go to the answers. Caller, you're on the air. Good afternoon. Please turn on your radio.
Good afternoon. I don't have a radio. Let me see.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me good?
Yes, I was just hearing feedback. But we can hear you now.
Good. Good afternoon to the panel, and good afternoon to our leader of the Federation, Honorable Timothy Harris, Minister of Agriculture.
Good afternoon.
Honorable Hamilton. Hamilton, these questions are directed to you through Bucket Media. Now, the farmers are very happy that they can now attend to their farms, that they have now gone quiet, and that. Now, some challenges they are facing. I know before the COVID-19, there was a program rollout to control the monkey population. Now, in all good, we are saying that we are trying to boost agriculture in terms of farming and crops and as well as livestock, right? But I'm not sure how the plan is going, right, to keep the monkeys down, because we are really getting affected from the monkey, wild dogs, and other animals. I'm not sure if you have any answers to that question. Another thing, suppose we have a surplus of food on the island. What will become of the farmers? Because in an earlier program, some people spoke about tobacco, and many supermarkets here and restaurants do not buy in big bulk. So we're wondering how would we able to meet our market. I know there are some challenges with the WTO in terms of export. So I'm not sure what is in place at the agriculture heads in terms of helping farmers to get their crop to be sold. Those are some very important questions. They're asking about a time frame. I know in your earlier statement you spoke about those persons whose cow has died through the sickness, and I'm very happy that the government have taken this serious and would assist the farmers. Maybe something that they can look into is maybe bringing in some new livestock and giving them out to the farmers. It may not be now, but maybe in the near future, that's something that we can look into.
Okay,
They
thank
had
you.
a program before where pigs was brought in because we wanted to have a good, strong breed of pork production in St. Kitts, right? So those are the questions that persons are asking. Honorable PM, the person said they're happy that the roundabout in Molyneux is being paved, and what they're suggesting that during lockdown, that these capital projects can continue because there's not much movement of traffic, so which means that the guys them can work more faster and more comfortable during the lockdown in completing these capital projects.
Okay, thank you very much, caller. I have two more questions, and then we will leave it all to the panel to answer those numerous questions if we have enough time. The last two questions that I have are whether there was any plan for a short-term citizenship by investment program similar to the Hurricane Relief Fund, which be established to bring some quickly needed funds to our economy. And two, in terms of diversification, and I guess this more goes to the Minister of Agriculture, what is the status of our potential marijuana industry in the context that it may help with our revenues over the next few years? And with that said, I think there are loads of questions for each of the panelists to answer. I would like to start with Mrs. Blake, who I believe got the first question, and then we go to Minister Hamilton, and then we end with the Prime Minister.
Okay, great. Okay. So one of the callers asked about the psychological effect and, the social distancing and what the psychological effect is. We recognize that this is an unprecedented situation, and it is leading to unprecedented levels of stress. The longer it goes on, the more uncertainty there is around when there will be some sort of resolution and some sort of normalcy. So we recognize that there is going to be an impact on a person's psychological and mental health. One of the things that we recognize, because he talked about it in the context of social distancing, we are social beings, and I think this situation highlighted how much so we are social beings and how we took for granted, or we take for granted, our connectedness and interconnectedness. People connected through all kinds of environments, church, visiting with family and friends, and school and work. All of these were areas of social connectedness. And so all of a sudden, these are not there anymore. And I think people may have been surprised at how empty they feel as a result of being sort of, just pulled out of these situations. So the term social distancing is affecting us because it is these very same social environments that we go to for protection and for building up our resilience and for just feeling better. So I think one of the things is that there is a trend towards saying physical distancing instead of social distancing, because what this pandemic is doing is forcing us to be separate physically. But what it also is doing is encouraging creativity in how we could connect socially. So you're seeing situations where people are reaching out more, people are using virtual platforms to reach out, people are finding ways to connect, people are talking over the fence to their neighbors. So there is a psychological effect when people disconnect. What we're saying is this opportunity is bringing to the forefront the ability for people to connect socially through different media. So, that is my thing. I'm just basically saying that I agree, yes, there is an effect, but we are reconstructing what it means to be socially connected, and we are able to see some benefits there.
Thank you. I think I could look at 3 questions which may have been asked earlier. Plan for reducing the monkey population. We are currently, we've had a program for the last year or two where at least one person in particular had been doing significant trapping. We now have moved to where we have at least 14 or 15 persons who are interested in and have been engaged to undertake the trapping of some of these monkeys. In fact, it was only a day or two ago that I signed an agreement and for the permanent secretary to establish a contract with a particular individual who had been very adept at bringing 50, 60 monkeys under control over the last year or so. And we have engaged him in a way that he can at least increase the number of monkeys that he can help us to reduce the population that we have. But there are others who have become engaged in the program, and I can assure you, if the young man who was doing it before continues to be as vigilant as he was, and the others are now on board, that we could have an impact on the size of the monkey population in St. Kitts and Nevis. Would you be in a position to introduce a SIMACO to facilitate marketing of food? Well, COVID-19 has brought to the fore a number of issues that everyone we have to discuss and determine the way forward. I do not know the financial well-being of SIMACO when it went out of business. I can't refer to that particular business model. But certainly wherever business models can be established to assist with the marketing of food, it would be a good thing. And I did say earlier in my presentation that if we produce more, the more we produce, some of the goods that we produce have a shelf life. And the shelf life will help to help them to last during periods where they're not being produced, because you do not produce all foods all year round. On the other hand, we will have to look at adopting those products to another level to preserve them. Maybe we have to look at some agro-processing of some of these foods into certain types of down-market products, which will then preserve them for a longer time. I think you also asked a question, someone asked a question, suppose we have surplus of food on the island. Well, the OECS ministers of government have been having discussions on this over the last couple of weeks. And as we speak, I do have what is a regional product, which is a cabinet submission to take to cabinet. Essentially, OECS ministers of government are looking at how do we maximize, how do we use the opportunity to be able to trade, to have goods being traded among all of our countries without certain taxes and protocols in place. So that cabinet submission will go to cabinet. I would not want to comment more on it until we have had a cabinet look at it. But perhaps I should say, it is looking at port duties and charges which can assist. And of course, looking at some of the SPS methodologies that we pay attention to, the phytosanitary measures, and those are things that can help with us being able to trade, send our food to other countries that might not be producing. We are in a position, I believe, however, to improve significantly the production of our food in St. Kitts and Nevis to help some of our neighboring countries, because there are some countries that cannot produce what we can produce. And this is why I'm encouraging everyone now. And again, I'm saying it in the context that we do not know how long this will last, whether there will be a resurgence, and what will be the state of play in foreign countries preventing food from coming here. It is better for us to produce more, even if we have to find a way somewhere down the road when the Prime Minister looks at the finance, to provide a way to pay farmers for things that we may never eat. Even if we have to do that, it's better to produce more than to have none at all. And then we behave like cannibals. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There was a marijuana question, but I don't think I'll go there now.
Okay.
Maybe, Prime Minister, maybe a whole program for marijuana.
Yes, yes. And we certainly should. What I would say quickly in that, we had always seen marijuana as expanding the opportunities for economic activity in the country and allowing St. Kitts and Nevis to, as it were, create an additional space for our people to become involved in an economic way and in a way that would bring them proper earnings, add to the reputation of St. Kitts and Nevis, because we wanted to focus on medical and scientific marijuana in a large way and ensure ordinary people would be able to participate. We had from the last, I think, budget or thereabout, made determinations. We were going to set up a unit. We already had from Dr. Beard a job description for quote-unquote a marijuana czar, because you needed a project champion, as you will, to put all the places together. We had an expert from Trinidad and Tobago who had worked with the AGRI in terms of fleshing out some of the regulations, etc. So those things are to be done. Of course, with all of the drama of the last couple of weeks since January or thereabout with the COVID, things have not gotten killed, but we still intend to pursue marijuana as industry in St. Kitts and Nevis, job creation, and of course, linking it into our international reputation of adding to health and wellness. Bearing in mind already we have some framework. We do a lot of tests here known to many people into a number of health illnesses and disease, Parkinson's, for example, and reproductive illnesses. All those are conducted by 2 primate facilities here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we are doing a lot of it, and those facilities really in terms of their contribution to our citizens who have an interest in science are doing a very good job. Indeed, several of our own people have had scholarships from those entities and gone abroad and enhanced themselves and are able to contribute. So it is still in the works, and we will have a conversation and this in the context of the forward movement of St. Kitts and Nevis and our overall plan to create an economy that is stronger, safer, and better for every citizen and resident. The question as to the plans for the CBI, that is something already under action. Indeed, very early, Mr. Lescan had developed, and his staff, a proposal which had come. And at that moment in time, we said, let's wait a bit, see how things will pan out. We don't want to look like we are being opportunistic in the context of a pandemic, so let's hold. We were mindful of the fact that when we had the foresight to introduce the hurricane relief funds, there were some persons who were so unpatriotic that they did not even give the program a chance. One particular individual, well known, went to Dubai, undermined the program, said it was illegal. I am going to revoke all the passports given to those people who have received passports as a result of their investment in the hurricane relief program. And when they had come after the night, we recognized that the person had divided loyalty, had allegiance to Dominica, and was therefore undermining our CBI program to give advantage to Dominica and increase his commission as a result of that. So we have learned from that. That program was a resounding success because it was well conceptualized, well implemented, and we put a lot of hard work in it. We certainly will do the same with respect to this CBI program, because we have worked hard over the last 5 years to restore confidence that had been lost. And people forget what we inherited. We inherited a program, CBI then, that by 2014 had lost support internationally. It had been resulted in a FinCEN advisory, that is U.S. Treasury Department, sent out an advisory warning the financial community to be aware of the program because, as it were, they could not trust the administration of the day. It resulted some 5 months after, in November 2014, of the Canadian government revoking the visa-free access which citizens and divisions had enjoyed hitherto. And so there was a collapse of confidence in the program. It took us a lot of work to get where we now are, a trusted partner with the U.S. government with respect to this. And yes, in a program like that, there's always the ups and downs in some cases, but we have a good confidence and an excellent working relationship. One of the things we have said to all the interested parties, come look at our systems and control. And if there are weaknesses, we are prepared to work to correct them. And so we have been upfront and open with respect to that. We have restored integrity. We have to continue to work upon it. And so the CBI will feature in our plan for the future of St. Kitts and Nevis. And just Friday, the financial secretary, and I spoke about our recent meeting just yesterday, we mentioned that there was a need to have this meeting with the stakeholders of the CBI to refine the proposal that we will take forward for a short-term period, to use the words of the moderator, to assist us in our fight against this pandemic. The matter of the vulnerability index that Mayor Motley spoke to on CNN, it's one that has been around for almost 30 years. It is a message that we have not yet had enough resonance, have not received enough resonance in the financial institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, in particular the IMF and the World Bank, and other agencies that are interested in graduating countries based on the share per capita income only. The vulnerability index is saying use a broader measure, not just one indicator, but several indicators that reflect more genuinely where a country is as a basis for graduation. And graduation in this case is not with gowns and caps, but saying you are no longer eligible to get low-cost financing. You will have to pay close to the market. So St. Kitts and Nevis had been in the fight to get acceptance to this. This is something that we will work with. We have advocated in almost every speech that we have made to the UN that this is critical. What the pandemic and, of course, before that the hurricanes have shown, whatever a country has, in the face of a disastrous event, it is never enough. So Dominica was wiped out. If you were to go by the same GDP in terms of the estimate of damages, and we see the slow coming back for that country and others thereafter. What health challenges do to individuals, the pandemic is doing to countries. It takes you off course. A serious cancer ailment take away all of your finances, no matter how big they are. And so we really have to exercise fiscal prudence. So the vulnerability, we have our strong support. We have been in that. The vulnerability, say, take into account the measures of longevity, how long people live, as an indication. Take into account how educated the society is, because these, in the end, are variables that also impact upon development. And we know that the science has said that the tertiary education, and that is why now they have a measure of tertiary education, because the larger the insertion of our citizens in tertiary education, the greater the capacity for them to help us in nation building. So we are very good at primary education, 100% enrollment. We are relatively okay at secondary, but we need to get higher rates of tertiary engagement in the society, because at that level we get the know-how. So we won't have to importing and bringing in foreign talents to assist us when we face challenges, or even to carry out our normal operations in our health centers, in our banks, etc., etc. So that is critical. The matter of Simacodrine has dealt with, but certainly what is clear in the context of St. Kitts is that we need a better model to be able to get goods to the market. A model that allows the farmers to do what they can do best, produce, but somebody else, whether it's a Simaco-like entity, it is for the experts in agriculture to quickly come up with a model. There needs to be a model that takes the good from the farmers, pay them their money, and somebody take on the job of marketing them, whether here in Anguilla, neighboring islands, or converting them into another product. 2 days ago, as I did my walk to my constituency, went into the neck and crannies, and there was a farmer. The farmer had over, 20 or 33 bags of onions. And, I had to take the phone call, a couple of people say, how can you help? But clearly, that burden has to be shifted to an appropriate entity. So they focus on the production, somebody else, more competent, more able, more agile, deal with the marketing and the storage, etc. So I want to thank the caller for that one. There was a suggestion about how we can end the entitlement mentality, and clearly I will be open to have a conversation on that and to invite those people, because the brand new St. Kitts, if you will, that we want to develop after COVID-19 must have a people ready and willing to contribute, a people who not just ask that the government gives, but say, this is what I can give to help take my country forward. Ask not what the country can do for you, but ask what you can do for the country. And I think any effort at dealing with the entitlement mentality may help us get closer to getting a good answer to that very powerful question that was asked before in the context of nation building. If we do increase the supply, do we tax the foreign fish? I wouldn't say that, but I don't know how Mr. Hamilton would answer. I can't recall. But I think that, again, as we produce more and we have appropriate system of storage, of using into multiplicity of other activities, then the excess can be used in rational and productive ways. And it reminded me that when I left here, went to Trinidad, dasheen and dasheen, the stem, leaves and so on, I never saw them being used as food. You go up to Trinidad, I hear them call them some kind of name, maybe callaloo or some other name. And they are being used, things that we would have thrown away. They are being utilized elsewhere. And so that gives a reminder that we could go further along the production chain in many of these things. So it's not just fresh fish. The fish that we get here is stored. And it comes in many forms, and you could do different things from that, and we need to expand the chain in that regard. I just want to acknowledge the helpfulness of the persons involved in the bus business, and to say, yes, I have heard the minister speak to some proposals that have come. They have not yet arrived to the cabinet. When they come, we will give them a fair look with respect to the way forward. While we are on it, we are urging the bus operators not to receive any passenger who does not wear a mask. These things that are being prescribed and recommended are carefully thought out and are intended to save lives. Even if they do not have a mask made from Sun Island or Lynette Bonaparte or Faustina Wilson from Molyneux, or the Lady Hamilton in Mansion, or wherever they are, at least cover your nose and your mouth when you are going to enter into public transport. That is critical. You are protecting your health and you're protecting our health. We want everyone basically to do this. Mortgage payments, someone asked, the answer is the ministers of finance, who are the membership of the Monetary Council, had persuaded the ECCB to have financial or commercial banks introduce a 6-month moratorium on their payments, and this is still in vogue. I should say that Royal Bank has advised me that they have made it automatically available to all borrowers on record. Some have declined it, some have not. The other banks, I understand, is saying, well, if you want it, you ask for it, we will deal with it on a case-by-case basis. We wish everyone was in a position to just blankly give it, but not every financial institution is at the same place. Some have reserved externally because they are branch of other and more, well, larger entities. With respect to the PAP and Social Security payouts, Social Security payout in the context of our stimulus package, those payouts are being made every day. So if you don't get Friday, perhaps Monday, Tuesday, they should be in the mail. I had asked that they have a hotline, I'm not sure if it's in place, so that persons can call to get an update. When we would have finished, I would speak to the senior minister regarding that, so persons know where their claims are. What we do know is that I think last Friday, the Social Security had possessed over and paid out for 2,000 claims. $2 million had been made ready to beneficiaries or applicants under the scheme. I want to thank, I think, John Paul. John Paul had some wisdom. How do you reconcile that persons taking a conscious effort not to contribute to Social Security, and now they want to be the first in the line to be able to withdraw from this scheme? I understand that, but I also understand that we are in a time of great uncertainty and great difficulty and turmoil all over the world, and a heart of compassion must come into play. And so what I hope is that those who may benefit, and we may yet devise a scheme that allows them to benefit, they learn from this experience. Those things that are there, like the self-employed program of the Social Security, are intended to protect you. To protect you if you were to get sick. To protect you in the case of some adversity, because that is a basic principle behind Social Security. Some adversity will happen in our lives, some difficulty. Sometimes it's sickness, sometimes injury on the job, sometimes for others, the female, it will be maternity. For others, regrettably, but it will be death, and that then their beneficiaries will have some assistance. So support this scheme going forward and learn from this particular lesson. But I hope that the Social Security will find some way of giving some measure of support, because this must be a shared sacrifice for all of us. He advises well that we should try to stretch the money like a rubber band. I hope a very strong, resilient rubber band, because we really don't know how long this pandemic will be with us or some remnants of it. And so I am encouraged by that. I was asked CBI revenue impact assessment. Clearly we are looking at that. And every aspect of life really has been impacted negatively. Financial services will be. CBI programs will be. Because in the context of this, who is out there doing the marking? Who is there traveling? Who is there thinking about these things when there are more pressing imperatives, if you will, happening in their lives? So, yes, this is going to be impacted, and we are, in a regular way, both myself and the financial team, involved with players in the market. As of the moment, there is still some sense of optimism with respect to it, but you know, we have to put things into perspectives. It's just like I hear people say American will come, and I have to think it through and say, well, Well, when will America open up? That's the first point of it, because that is where the bulk of our visitors come. And who will want to come as soon as America opens up, having regard to what we have gone through collectively as a world. And all these tend to temper and bring a greater sense to realism as to what this opening up and some of these things mean. Grenada is actively promoting their plan. One thing we know that St. Kitts and Nevis has is a brand name, the oldest and the best and the most reliable. We have revised it since we got there to provide a 24-hour update in terms of application. No other persons have that. We have introduced innovations where you can get an expedited processing without loss of the due diligence, because that applies everywhere. And those things people were prepared to pay an extra for to get it, just as people can pay more and get an emergency passport, but all the basic requirements still apply, your police record, etc., etc. So that is something in the works. Are we prepared to have a bipartisan involvement in looking at the forward trend for tourism? I would say beyond that, and more than that, we are interested in an all-of-society approach. I think we want to get out of these dovetailing people into political umbrellas. So, depending on your color, you come because it's a party thing. No, we want this to start from the conception that this is a national building effort, nation building. And in nation building, the color mustn't matter. We want everyone who is able to contribute to come and to render assistance and support in a structured way. And this is what we will advise. This is what has worked for us. You see, at the NEOC, the chamber is there, the church is there, the NGO is there. You see, individual donors are there. We're not concerned with their politics, we are concerned with their contribution. And so, in the context of tourism or TBI, we are not looking for political intervention. We are looking for intervention from the broader plane of nation building and what people can contribute in the context of where they see the program can go. We are inviting them to come and to help us build a stronger and safer St. Kitts and Nevis. I think I may have answered all of the questions. If not, on another occasion, or the moderator may help me overcome those that I have forgotten, but I'm prepared to come again and be better advised on some of them.
Thank you very much, panelists and Prime Minister. I think you've addressed all the questions that were asked. If there are some that you have not addressed, I think we will invite you back. I'm sure you'll be willing to come because you have definitely made the rounds within the last few months. And I think that's important for people to note that there are not many countries in this world that people can call into a program and speak to the Prime Minister. I've always admired St. Kitts about that. We allow people to speak truth to power, no matter what their political affiliation. And I also agree it should be an all-inclusive approach. This is a hopefully once-in-a-lifetime situation, and the politics must fall to one side. Our motto is country above self. And I think that is very important at this time when we need everybody on deck. So with that said, I would like to thank each of the panelists, the Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Minister of Health and Minister of Agriculture, and Mrs. Blake for coming today. I think it was a very informative program. I think we got some very good questions from the callers, and I think we all learned a lot, and that is the goal of the program. I wish everyone a happy curfew Saturday afternoon, and I will allow the panelists to say their goodbyes.
Yes, starting with Michele.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Garth, and thank you very much for having us here. As I said before, mental health is a cross-cutting issue, and we want to be able to bring it into mainstream discussion. And certainly this is an opportunity for us to reset and again look at just the health, the overall health of all of our citizens. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I just want to repeat for posterity that every individual in this country must at this time tighten his belt, must exercise thrift in all of your affairs. We do have habits of spending every dime for which we work, buying things we really don't need. Sometimes we're doing it just to impress other people. And the truth is, the people we try to impress don't really like us. So I'm saying exercise thrift. Put aside something for a rainy day. Learn the lessons which have been transcribed in the Bible. We must be thrifty when the going is good. Someday, the going will be bad. The government has done that. It is why we have been able to afford a stimulus package in the first instance of $120 million. Nowhere else in the region has come close. Barbados, I think I heard, was only 20. And when you think of little St. Kitts and Nevis, after the position we were in a few years ago, second in the world in debt, it is testimony of the management capability of the Minister of Finance, Prime Minister. I want to also say to those persons out there who are worried about the monkeys that we are doing what we can. And I want to thank the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance for increasing the budget for 2020 for dealing with the monkeys. I appreciate Win FM having me on this program today. I hope that those persons who listen have learned something new. I too have learned some things by listening to some of the questions that persons have asked. And I trust that in the coming days and weeks, I'll be able to share more information with those who are thinking positively about their country. I am not looking for persons who just want to be malicious. I'm looking for positive, important recommendations that would enhance the quality of life of individuals. We set about to ensure that the greatest good is done for the greatest number of persons, especially when it comes to those who are less fortunate than ourselves. We are called upon to be more compassionate, and we are putting every foot, both right and left foot forward, to ensure that the people who need our compassion gets that compassion from those of us who are put in position to govern. It must come from within us. We operate better when we are empathetic, when we are, when we then understand that it must be more cordial to people. We operate better when we are compassionate. We must understand that the minute we begin to be partisan and critical and so on, the worst comes out of us. So I'm calling on our people to be positive, and let us move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the two esteemed panelists for being here and to say how I feel personally favored to have had our psychologists to come out on a lockdown day to share our wisdom. And I would say to you that I saw snippets of her presentation at another forum, and I was impressed, and I thought the kind of real talk she was doing then, the country ought to hear from an impartial person, because sometimes, again, a political phase, things get caught in that cycle, and the message was more powerful. And for me, it's really, how do we build the nation? So I want to thank you, Michele, for coming and doing a wonderful job. My colleague, Eugene Hamilton, carries multiple portfolios cutting across, but they are all interrelated, health and agriculture. I was happy to have him come because, again, one of the things the pandemic has taught us, we must never forsake our own capacity and capability to produce goods and services. So it is our food. Then it was our mass. Luckily for us, we had Sun Island ready to respond, and now has been able, perhaps it can grow, to produce 15,000 masks per week. So within 1 month, all of St. Kitts and Nevis could have at least one reusable mask. And we could begin to look at supplying Anguilla, supplying St. Martin, etc., if those opportunities come. And on that note, I want to encourage every employer to give their employee the gift of one mask, one reusable mask, so that they understand the importance of it, and that could be more pervasive in the community. Giving them what may cost $10 to $15 could add 15 more years of productive service to your entity, and with them even be more grateful to you for that special gift you would have given. For me, as the Prime Minister of the country, I understand the historic significance, for I have never contemplated a life in politics until, of course, I got caught in the hang of it, growing up with a father who was a trade unionist, a father who worked on the estate, a father who was actively engaged in reading, and the political leadership of the day got close to. And lots of things were happening in the household. He was a man who served, delivered 33 children, of which we know. So it was a large family, and all the ups and downs, the happiness and the sorrows of that have come to the fore. But I've never contemplated it. But I have been very grateful for the people of Constituency 7, Bellevue to Atlas, and the people of the country who have given me an opportunity to serve. And even more so, grateful to the country of large, because in 2015 they gave me the opportunity to lead this country that I love with all my heart and mind for such a time like this. Clearly, when we started, we never contemplated the worst. Maybe we should have. We never contemplated we will have the wrath of hurricanes back to back. And worse yet, none of us contemplated we will be dealing with a pandemic. But it is. God ordained leaders, and He put them in place for a purpose. There has been many sleepless nights as I attempt to work and to sort out my own thoughts so that I could bring clarity of leadership to the country and to the cabinet at this particular moment where decisive decisions have to be made, and not at all times popular decisions can be made. I want to say thank you to the cabinet and to all the people who have given their advice, their support, and to remember kindly those who tell me every day, Dr. Harris, we are praying for you. We know your load is heavy, and they send me a text or a little thought. All of those things have helped. My desire is to take St. Kitts and Nevis safely to another place. And if I may use another biblical analogy for what it is worth, crossing the Red Sea to a better place, the Canaan land, we must see this moment of difficulty as an opportunity. And as Michele used the terminology of reframing, for some it is whether the glass is half full or half empty. And if it is half full, you take a more positive look of it. If it's half empty, you are more negative. And the actions that follow are going to reflect that kind of mind frame. So I want our people to be positive. This is an opportunity for us. We are struggling, yes. But this is an opportunity for us to make a brand new history. Let's suppose that St. Kitts and Nevis become the first country to effectively defeat COVID-19. We would have created a brand new history for St. Kitts and Nevis, using our own creativity, our own discipline, our own ingenuity to develop something of which not only us but the generation after us can be proud. For us to do that, it has to be an all of society approach. And in such times, always in the life of every great nation, opportunities and challenges come, and they always come together. And it is which part do you take? Which part you take to redeem the future, recognizing that we would have fallen short in some of our deliberations, but now we have a chance to pick up the pieces and to go towards the mountaintop. I want to encourage every boy and girl and every citizen and resident in St. Kitts and Nevis. Let us work together at this time to rebuild our country and take it to the promised future stronger and safer for all of us and the generations that will come behind. And to all who are in the forefront of this war against COVID-19, and we like to say the front line, but there are people in the middle lines and there are people in the back lines, like those who get up and go and ensure that our step workers, 3,000 plus of them, can get their paycheck. Those who ensure that the established and non-establishment workers get their check. Those in the banks who do not get to go in the supermarkets, where now we have 4 days they can. But all of those people are doing a fantastic job to help take the country through. That should be our focus at this particular moment in time. And we will have adequate time to deal with all the other things that will develop in the normal life of the country. So thank you, St. Kitts and Nevis, and keep me in your prayers. I will continue to do my endeavor best, to do the best that I can for my country and people. Thank you very much to Win FM, and thank you to Mr. Wilkin for being an effective moderator, brought difficult questions online and offline, but thank you for being part of this program and this exercise of getting St. Kitts back to work. Thank you. May God bless you all.
Prime Minister, just before we leave, I just want to ask one question of you. Can you publicly declare myself and Mrs. Blake essential workers so that we can get home without being arrested?
I publicly declare that Mr. Blake, Mr. Wilkin and Miss Blake must get home safely without being arrested.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On that note, everyone have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.